Hello, this is a compilation for all of my Mage the Ascension tradition videos. Specifically, this is the 9 mystic traditions. This really depends on when you're watching this, but in the future, or it's already out, I'm going to have a separate compilation for my videos on the Technocracy. I don't want to just lump them in together. I'm going to have separate compilations for just each group of faction, basically. But yeah, that's it. Fun little compilation. See ya. When you think of a wizard, what do you immediately think of? I imagine a large chunk of you think of old man, big bushy beard. He's in a big tower researching, maybe pondering an orb. Well, congratulations, you fit in with basically all of Western magic and fantasy. That's just the vibe you get with wizards. And what if I was to tell you, it's not because of the normal traditions of storytelling and how they adapt and how tropes kind of warp their way through societies. What if instead I told you it's because there's a secret society of wizards all trying to build this image of themselves into our world? Well, that's what it is in Mage the Ascension, because today we're talking about the most wizardly of wizards, the Order of Hermes, the group that will ring true for the vast majority of you from like the United States, the UK, Canada. Shout out to the 1% of Brazilian viewers, by the way. That's not even a point that like Brazil has a different image of a mage. I actually have zero clue if that is the case. It's just like the biggest following I have in my audience that isn't from like North America and Europe. The Order of Hermes are the biggest of the 9 traditions. They have the most influence, power, and wealth, and I think they're the most familiar for everyone watching trying to get an understanding of Mage the Ascension, and genuinely they're very interesting because they are hermetic mages, which hermeticism is a real concept in our world, and this is another excuse for me to talk about esoteric bullshit I like talking about. Little fun factoid, I guess, about my real life. I went to college for film production. I know, don't clap, an art degree, how useful. If I didn't go into film production, I would have gone into religious studies focusing on esotericism and mysticism, because I find it really, really interesting. The Order of Hermes are hermetic mages, like the name implies. Which, what is hermeticism for the people that don't know? And I don't blame you if you don't know. It is a large concept with a lot of context. I will break it down as simply as I can, but it is a simplified version. Just keep that in your head. Hermeticism is the pursuit of understanding the dichotomy in the relationship between the universe and the self. And this is done through just general philosophy, kind of attaching it to a lot of religious concepts and like a physical practice. Hermeticism is really, really wide-ranging. It permeates a lot of culture. This is all based off of the writings in the Hermetica, as claimed to be written by Hermes Trismegistus, who is a fusion between Thoth and Hermes. A little unfair to Thoth, my boy. I don't know why Hermes got all the cool front billing, but whatever. Who very explicitly wasn't a real person. This is like a syncretic character that was melded between like the Greeks and the Egyptian religions. But it's through this concept that we get the idea of Western magic and magical practices. As like, this is where we get magical language, like symbols and runes. This is where we get alchemy. This is where we have the idea of even doing a ritual. All that comes down through Hermeticism. That's hermetic magic. You've also heard variants of this in your day-to-day life. Do you know the phrase, as above, so below? That's not the full quote. Here it is, like from Latin. It is literally that dichotomy of the universe and the self. That's what this means, which, funnily enough, this is the typical symbol that's used for as above, so below. I wonder what the cover art of Mage the Ascension is. Does that look familiar? God, I love my job. Hobby. It's not a job yet. Subscribe to the channel if you want it to be my job. But back to Mage the Ascension. The Order of Hermes, Hermetics, which they actually got their start, similar to Hermetics in our world, in Egypt. Specifically with, I'm very sorry about this, 2 Phoenician mages, awakened ones, known as Djouadi and Sasheta. They traveled over to Egypt and they got their start, typical wizard shit in ancient worlds. They became these like heavenly figures almost, they were deified, and they did a lot of things, which those names, unfamiliar. I don't blame you. you might recognize them for the names they were later given, that being Thoth and Seshat. They also built the pyramids. I just want to say, they built the pyramids, they invented writing. That's these two mages. It's from these original wizards that the concept of Hermeticism in the true magic sense came from, which this also was later developed even harder by another prominent figure, that being King Solomon. Man, if I had a nickel for every time I had to bring up King Solomon's esoteric background, which I'm not going to get into super detail. If you actually want to learn more about King Solomon, go watch my Trench Crusade video, go watch this one. But King Solomon was an archmage, which what that means in World of Darkness terms. When it comes to performing your magic, performing your stuff, you have your sphere. Now there are 5 levels you can actually achieve, your 5 dots. Let's focus on forces. Forces being the main sphere of dominance for the Order of Hermes. Now at level 1, that's basically sensing the energy. You are aware that this sphere exists and you can like see it happening, you can sense it. When it comes to 5, that's like full influence of it. You control this shit. As in, you can summon a tornado or ignite the air. Forces goes nuts, and it's where you go if you want to cast Fireball. But level 5, as you can see, pretty crazy. What an Archmage is that somebody who gets to level 6. You haven't just mastered it, you control it. You dominate this sphere, which is largely the main theme of the Order of Hermes. They are will shapers, which magic in World of Darkness, like true magic with a K, is quite literally reality bending. And everyone chooses a different methodology and philosophy when it comes to it. The Order of Hermes is purely in that lens of, no, I control the universe. It does what I say when I want it to. There is none of that, let's embrace the world, let's become in sync with nature and the universe. Nah, I'm making a firestorm. Even though these figures are like the origin of the Order of Hermes, the actual order itself as a collection didn't start until the 700s in Germany. Shout out to the 2% of my German audience. These mages gathered around in Germany realizing, we all like the same thing, magical knowledge and ancient wisdom. What if we worked together and conglomerated our information? Crazy concept. It would grow and grow and grow, and very, very quickly, the Order of Hermes became like the magical group, the chantry to go to, or the magical group to be shat on by, because they got into power very quickly by literally doing the wizard thing of becoming court mages, advisors, just figures present in like governments and corporations, just the equivalent of corporations in like the 800s, 900s, like whatever. But it's not like a medieval lens of what a wizard is. And they use this power to really shit on every mage group that didn't agree with them fully. Because that's the central crux of World of Darkness and Mage the Ascension. There is a proper way to ascend and to do magic, so says every single tradition ever. But they really like cracking down on those they called uncivilized magic users. But as time went on, the Order of Hermes started becoming formed out of houses, each house having different views, methodologies, kind of roles in their society, where the 3 very prominent houses at this point in like 1000 CE was Flambeau, Tytalus, and Tremere. Tremere quickly actually became incredibly prominent, like the house. They controlled the Order of Hermes, largely because they killed an entire druidic order. Like they just killed them all. Through this and a lot of political scheming and backstabbing, they became the de facto rulers in the de facto house. But their magic started being really funky. Really weird during the Schism War, as it was called. And it was really annoying because their like immortality magic wasn't working, to where Lord Tremere, he wanted a way around this. And if you want to understand this history, you should go watch my Tremere video. Because, yeah, they became vampires. Speeding up a good bit, though, in their timeline, the Order of Hermes did not stay on top for very long. They had the biggest target on their backs. And, due to their methodologies and philosophies, a funny little group started growing out of their ranks, that being the Order of Reason, or the Technocracy, who really started to gain a lot of prevalence and a lot of traction. This scared the Order of Hermes very badly, because now they were being pushed out of all their political dominance, all those like key spots they filled. Technocrats were now there. So instead, they shifted to secret societies. One of the big groups that they're behind is the Freemasons, to where all these like secret societies and clubs, those are Order of Hermes hermetic mages, or at least funded by them. This is a way to keep some form of prominence. It is literally not a joke. The reason we have the image of like the mage as a concept, that's the Order of Hermes style mage. They do a lot of work to keep this in public light. Since like this isn't a vampire thing, the Order of Hermes and the traditions as a whole do want to return to the golden age of just magic and being awakened, where magic was a thing you didn't have to hide at all. That's more modern once we started really defaulting into like order and reason and science. Much like every World of Darkness faction though, they're not without their major blemishes. World War II hit, and the Order of Hermes decided to become real friendly with the Nazis. They supported the Axis side in the war as like a faction. And this is based off of the fact that the Nazis were really esoteric. Like they had a lot of weird esoteric bullshit inside of their groups. This is actually a real thing. If you want to go down the rabbit hole, the one that isn't like sensationalized, because it gets a little weird of like Hitler was performing magic. No, it was all like pseudo archaeology and like the concept of an ancient Aryan, not alien, though they are very similar and have largely the same origins. In World of Darkness though, the Nazis were a lot more like magically focused. They were 100% trying to do some weird, creepy bullshit. The Order of Hermes, in their typical we like secret societies bullshit, was down for it. The only reason they broke away and actually started fighting against the Nazis wasn't because, you know, the things they were doing. It's actually because the Nefandi were in like the Nazi ranks, and yeah, their influence was going throughout all of it, all of World War II. It's a whole thing. World War II in the World of Darkness gets really weird and really interesting. I think it's interesting, but to actually go to modern day, the Order of Hermes is still like the most prominent of the 9 traditions. Like as such, so many actually important events occur inside of their territory. Like the whole convention of creating the Order of the 9 traditions that happened at one of their chantries. Or another very prominent event that's kind of in a dubious level of canon, Dotastep, which is the destruction of like their biggest chantry, their biggest headquarters. It was destroyed by like a traitor as a herald of the apocalypse. It's an entire thing. I honestly need to make a video on just that for Mage. I think it's really interesting. Part of it because it exists in a dubious level of canon, much like the Avatar Storm with the Week of Nightmares. That's just because the actual books are carried out in a way of you get to decide what has occurred in your game because it's going to affect a lot of different things. Dotastep and the Avatar Storm, both of these, if they occurred in your chronicle, essentially mean all of the elders of the Order of Hermes are gone. I'm talking either dead in Dotastep or locked out of Earth. Since if you're really, really good at magic, you don't exist in the material world anymore. You exist in a higher plane of existence, like out in the Umbra, because you don't get affected by paradox out there. However, with the Avatar Storm making like traveling the Umbra harder, they are locked out. They're just fully gone. As you can maybe imagine, having a group of, as you can imagine, with their big focus on ancient wisdom, ancient knowledge, and their elders, all of them just being gone hits their order very hard, as they're really, really deep into hierarchies. So yeah, it's up to you if this has occurred. It's going to change how they present themselves. Though their hierarchy is still there, it's just hurt. The way you can look at this is it's like the Tremere. The Tremere in Vampire the Masquerade have their pyramid and their very strict hierarchies because they stole it from the Order of Hermes. They originally were part of this group, which it is a really interesting method because they operate a little differently from a lot of the other traditions. One of the big things that they do is actually recruit people. They find people with the capability of awakening, hopefully at least, where they will approach you, unlike the other traditions where you have to approach them. You have to want to join, they will pull you in. And largely this is because once you get to a certain rank and are a master in the Order of Hermes, you are required to take an apprentice. You have to pass on your information and your knowledge, which also plays into their funny politics. Because if you get an apprentice and your apprentice is dog shit, people are gonna be like, man, this master must suck. We should treat him worse. Or if they visibly are doing too good, they're immediately like, that can be a threat to me. But how it starts is really fun because like the first 2 levels of initiation, you're actually learning hedge magic. which hedge magic is just not true magic. It's not reality warping. It is you are learning spells like from a spell book. And this is something that everybody can do. Like, if we existed in World of Darkness right now, if we tried hard enough, we could learn spells. The thing is, this is kind of a trap, because otherwise it is a good thing to learn. You're learning a lot of these principles. But if you as an individual are becoming a hedge mage and you're kind of just satisfied, you're like, oh, dope, I got these spells. What else do I need? Why would I try anymore? You're done. You're not gonna do anything in this order. They want people who want power. They want the knowledge. They want to find the truth of the universe. That is somebody who does not embody the concept of shaping the universe to your will. In this entire education process, you're being overloaded with magical work. They're throwing everything at you, throwing concepts at you, and you're being just overwhelmed for years because they're trying to force you to awaken, which does happen. All of this, like, eventually something is going to click and you're going to awaken to that fact that the universe isn't real. And with enough effort, eventually you can become a full member of the order. And you have a bunch of rules you have to follow because they are pretty strict on that, with a caveat. The rules are pretty simple. It's like, don't murder your fellow brothers, don't betray them, don't spy on them, don't steal their information, don't collaborate with demons or the undead, don't do all these shady things. However, it's not a crime if you don't get caught, is the philosophy of the Order of Hermes. They like people who will go full into that, like the ends justify the means. You will do anything for the information. Just don't get caught. Like, a lot of hermetic mages do just straight up do demonic magic. It's super frowned upon, but no one cares as long as they don't see you do it. But yeah, that's the Order of Hermes. There's like a lot of little details that are very fun. Like the fact that they have like the biggest claim to Merlin as like the guy being real and being part of their order. Who knows? A bunch of other traditions have that exact same claim. But yeah, they're fun. And like, there's so many other fun factions in Mage the Ascension. I will talk about them in the future. It's very fun to dig through all of this. So yeah, that's it. I want to shout out my channel members who make all these videos possible. And a major shout out to my top tier channel members, Ultra Mega Jesus, Robbie Beckmeyer, and Czar Shadow. Absolute legends, all of you. But yeah, that's it. See ya. Last time, we talked about the most wizardly wizards on the Council of Nine Traditions, which is a very cool, fun vibe. Who doesn't want to be a classic wizard? But what if we took a step, just like a little bit to the left, and talked about the other vibe of magic that's very fun, necromancy. A magical taboo in basically every game, every setting, but it's not our fault because game necromancy is always very cool. And I will be honest, at least, there's a bit of a misconception when it comes to the faction we're talking about. That being the Euthanatoi, or Chakravanti, which I am going to call them the Chakravanti throughout this video, simply because, while in like Mage 20th, the most current edition, I'm going to use this based on the lore because the book has them titled as Euthanatos, like that is their technical name. The actual mages inside of this circle largely use Chakravanti. I'll get into everything about that later. It's the reason why both names are in the title. It's actually like something I went back and forth on what I would use. But the Chakravanti are very interesting. They are the mages sitting on the circle of entropy, the idea of death, or just fate, destiny, luck. All these concepts are inside of entropy, and it's a really cool magic sphere, I'll be honest. It's very fun. But the Chakravanti are essentially soldiers working for karma. One of the things I always love about looking into World of Darkness is just where did they pull some of their shit from? And it's super obvious with Chakravanti, it's Indian religions. Like, it's the whole way down, be it actual Hinduism or Buddhism. Like Tibetan Buddhism is a massive inspiration. Now, the other name they have, Euthanatoi, is obviously Greek, which they have that Greek sprinkled in there. They also have some Celtic, they have some African myth. It's actually a really fun melding of a lot of different thought processes in mythologies. For example, the Chakravanti are very, very focused on the concept of your Dharma. Inside of your Atman, which is your soul, basically, it's the part of you that is you, truly you. Everybody has a role. Everybody has a job to play in the universe. Yo, editing Glueboy here. So, I was about to explain some very core concepts poorly, so I'm going to do it much better. So the main concept, the big one when it comes to Chakravanti, is the idea of the wheel. The wheel of cycle, life and death, the wheel of ages, which that term has some more World of Darkness baggage, but the concept largely stands. Everything is cyclical. Everything rotates on this wheel. That's the cycle of life and death. Now, the Chakravanti already don't believe that death is the end. They believe it is one of the ends you can reach because they're super big into reincarnation. And this is like a physical fact that they have. Like, they have experienced reincarnation because, you know, they're awakened. They get to do some extra cool things. And the Atman is essentially the separation between them and their avatar. The Atman is just them, the soul, and with like the avatar as well. And when it comes to Dharma, Dharma is the aspect of the universe where your role is to keep the wheel turning at like the rate it should be going. You live your life, you cultivate your Dharma, and you are able to ascend. This is where a lot of the Buddhist thought comes from. The reason you don't want this wheel going at like the wrong rate is because the wheel is separated into ages. That's where the Wheel of Ages idea comes from. The last cycle of the wheel is essentially apocalypse. Everything is destroyed, everything dies, and then it goes back to the start of rebirth. Only the gods get to decide when that happens. It'd be kind of messed up if, say, humans decided to accelerate that, which is what happens when you're playing outside of your Dharma. You are accelerating the wheel's turn and you're throwing the universe out of balance. However, the Chakravanti also believe they have an extra special duty with their Dharma. It is their job to make sure everyone else is able to cultivate this. They get to reach their enlightenment when they help everybody else. Honestly, a little similar to the idea of the Technocracy, believing that everyone should ascend together. Otherwise, you know, mages are being selfish and unfair. They're just going about it in very different ways. Chakravanti serve as the keepers of the wheel to make sure that everything karmically is totally fine and cool and dandy. But there's also the Euthanatoi part of this. Like, where did that come from? Well, Euthanatoi badly translates to good death, because this comes from like Greek death cults, not like creepy murder cult. This is a big thing. They have a lot of baggage around the idea of them being creepy murder necromancers. They're not. These death cults are the ones who are like worshiping Hades and like chthonic gods. That's the whole concept there. It is something that's kept a little secret, not because it's like taboo or wrong, but because the idea of death makes people uncomfortable. The Chakravanti were a bit more open about it because where they come from, death is less of a thing you worry about. But this melding actually happened of like Greek religions and Indian religions because Alexander the Great in 300 BCE, like roughly around there, he at one point rolled into India and he had a bunch of Greek death priests about him, just all hanging out doing their typical funerary rites. If someone dies, you know, they'll do their rites. If someone's suffering, they'll mercy kill them, a lot of things like that. The Chakravanti, the same type of priests, also awakened mages really early on, saw the Greeks doing this. And they had like, I assume a Spider-Man pointing meme is like, oh, same brain, we do the same thing. Same with the Celts that eventually made contact because they heard, oh, hey, I think these Greek and Indian guys, I think they have the same belief system we do. So it's really a collaboration of mythology that breaks up the Chakravanti's history. Because like every religion has that story of the underworld of death, the old gods needing to be killed by the new. You know, think of like the Titans from Greek myth. Like Kronos had to get murdered. So they hung out, swapped ideas as mages did, all swapping their concepts of how they do magic and how they would eventually reach enlightenment. But then the Great Convocation happened, and the actual Council of the Nine Mystic Traditions was created. Now, they were really able to work their way into getting the seat of entropy. First of all, getting it approved at all, because a lot of the other mages, also uncomfortable with the idea of death, didn't really want it to be there, but they were able to talk their way through it. And specifically, the Chakravanti, like from India, were almost treated the same way the Dream Speakers were. The problem was the Chakravanti were a little too well organized before they were actually organized into one group. So it was a lot harder to do what they did to the Dream Speakers, which is, I don't know, you're an ethnic mage, you go in the ethnic mage tradition. Fuck you, Order of Hermes, I know what you did. And it was also through this they had to take the name Euthanatos, which is why that is the main name for them now. And the lore specifically states this. Despite them being categorized like this, a lot of them just prefer Chakravanti because the name Euthanatos, good death, has a lot of implications. It makes them sound like a bunch of creepy murderers. They don't really like this. Some go with Euthanatos if you're singular, Chakravanti, and there's like another third name. It's specifically debated because the Avatar Storm happened and locked away all of those old, much higher enlightened mages. So now all the new mages are kind of kicking around like, oh, we're not being bossed around by these old fucks. We can change our name. Just no vote has happened yet. I assume if there ever is a Mage 5e, I'm like doubtful that'll happen, they're going to be the Chakravanti. But what do these guys actually do? You know, they're keepers of the wheel, they're like soldiers of karma, things I've kind of mentioned, but what's their vibe? So, one of the big reasons the council even allowed them to be on this is because they wanted people who would get the job done and that would actually be willing to get their hands dirty. Because the Great Convocation happened because the Technocracy started becoming a thing. And if shit went down, they needed someone who would actually bloody their hands, which they will. They're not like gleeful in this fact. They have a role, they have a job of maintaining Dharma, maintaining the wheel of life. Because the wheel doesn't just spin on its own. Even worse, actually, now that we're getting more into modern nights, because there are a lot of spooky things bumping in the night, mucking up the universe. There's a lot of people not fulfilling their dharma and just acting horribly. Because the wheel is affected by things like corruption, mass disease, horrible atrocities going on, or just general dark things in the world, like vampires. This doesn't mean like a Chakravanti's gonna kick your door in a vampire game, but they're on your ass. They don't like you. But they have the role that if someone is really, really breaking out of their dharma, acting too badly, and affecting everyone else, they will take care of it. And I mean it in the full take care of it, like silenced pistol, pillow over the head kind of thing. They will kill people to make sure everything is chugging around fine. It is like karmic hitmen. That's the vibe. Because it's entropy, they get roped around into ideas of necromancy, which they do 100%. They're able to do necromantic shit. They have less of the heebie-jeebies around dead things and dead people. Like they 100% can and have, you know, made puppets of undead creations. People are uncomfortable by this, but they're trying to be respectful. At least that's what the stated, like, rules are. Realistically, what they really do is affect, like, fate and probability, or travel through the underworld, because they are able to, like, travel through the Umbra. This is where you get crossovers with Wraith the Oblivion. Shout out to the one Wraith fan that's definitely out there. I'm sorry it's not two, so someone can't pilot your shadow. But they do have stated rules of engaging with the actual spirits of the dead. They have a sworn rule to not use entropy magic on a spirit. That is a bit fucked up. I personally don't believe they all stick to this. I think it's kind of an Order of Hermes situation. And because we're in World of Darkness, not everyone's gonna be like all hunky-dory nice. There are definitely a bunch of Chakravanti mages who have done some evil shit. I would not be surprised. And like I've mentioned before with the whole crossing of religions thing, this engages how they do their necromantic magic, because a lot of times it's through rituals embodying an old story or the vibe of an old story. For example, sometimes when a Chakravanti is doing a fun old ritual, maybe they want to travel to the underworld, they can do it with that vibe of Orpheus going down in the underworld, where it's not really allowed. Like, you're not really supposed to do that, bro. Or they embody a god of death like Yama. This is so much they have their own word for this, Kalanda, which is referring to the staff used by Hades, or Yama, just gods of the dead. The other role that they fill is healing. They actually come from a lot of very healing traditions, especially they have an African one that comes from Zimbabwe. That is a lot stronger of a healing religion, healing magic. So they can fill a lot of these roles, though their main large one are Keepers of the Wheel. They will kill for karma. This is not something they revel in, obviously. They take this role in that air of somebody has to. It might as well be me. I can handle it. I am preserving other people so they don't have to muck around in the dirt like I do. One of the ways that they do this is they hate the Nefandi. These evil warped wizards corrupting everything. Like literally, the Nefandi's entire shit goes against everything the Chakravanti believe in. So they have a special group inside of their larger organization, which granted isn't like majorly structured. It's not as structured as something like the Order of Hermes. It's a lot looser, but you can be brought up in a lot of different circles depending on who's training you. Like as a newly awakened one, it can just depend if you're hanging out with the right folk. There's a group in the Chakravanti known as the Golden Chalice, where that's literally all they do. They hunt down like the worst of the worst, and they also hunt down the Nephanti. They just kill them, put them down like a dog, which I don't think it's going to be that much of a surprise for the returning members of my audience when I say that the Golden Chalice is my favorite thing in this faction because they're modeled like Byzantine assassins. Another fun thing I can point to with this vibe, the Chakravanti were the ones who got involved in World War II pretty early. I'm gonna be making a whole video on it. It's taken a little longer than I thought it would, but the Chakravanti were some of the only mages that didn't immediately start getting cozy with the Axis power. And one of the things they did, being themselves, is started executing mages who were committing war crimes with the Nazis. So based, absolutely based. Like I've mentioned, they're not as structured and organized like the Order of Hermes, but they don't just like leave their apprentices for the wolves. They will train you, because if you're going to take this role, you should be trained. I don't think it's a healthy idea to hop somebody up on the concept of killing for Dharma and then I don't know, just letting them out in the world. You should train that. But it's going to determine like really who you're around, because a lot of the groups and like inner factions of the Chakravanti are focused on the different religion and groups that it came from. Like you can join some minor faction that is a lot more Indian, you can join one that's a lot more Greek, Celtic, African traditions, like I mentioned, Zimbabwe. Like it just depends where you're hanging around. There's a lot of different mages in the sphere that are connected through the pure concept of entropy and how they value it. Because there are just a lot of ways to value entropy. The big through line is the idea of death isn't the end of things, it is a cycle. Death is not something you should be afraid of. The way they teach you this is through a ritual known as the Disco, which is a ritual where you're magically induced to have a near-death experience. They put you right on the brink of fully dying and then bring you back. That way you can appreciate death. You know, that's normal, totally normal thing to do, but it's just through the sphere of entropy, which is a really fun sphere, I will say. While it is hitting those vibes of like decay, the end of things, it is also the idea of like probability and luck. A lot of Chakravanti utilize this sphere expertly, because what is the best way to hide the fact you're doing magic? Well, what if your spell looked like random chance? Granted, you need like level 4 entropy to affect another person, which, as the game literally points out, you need level 4 entropy if you're going to use this to deal damage to somebody. But like, I didn't cast a spell. Sure, this giant weird Rube Goldberg machine effect just happened. I don't know, bonking a bowling ball on somebody's head. I didn't do it. I'm innocent here. That's a random chance. It purely just depends on the type of Chakravanti you want to make. Because when it comes to actual implements, it depends. Because obviously, a lot of like religious, cultural items around death, that is something they value. They did come from ancient death priests. So a lot of funerary items or even just bones, that is a focus they use. Alternatively, items of chance. So there are some Chakravanti out here pulling out a card from a deck of cards, rolling a die, I don't know, flipping a coin. If you want to be like a cool gambling man, that's how you do it. I don't know, flip a coin, heads, you're dead. Yeah, but that's the Chakravanti or Euthanatoi. I truly don't think it matters what you call them. I'm just banking it on lore and the fact that I think if we get a Mage 5e, they're just going to be the Chakravanti. Like, I would put money on that. The lore is directly already saying it, so it's not a surprise. But yeah, I like this tradition a lot. They're very fun, and I did this because if I was going to play a Mage the Ascension character, this is the one I was already looking at to do. I love chance and luck magic. I think it's really fun, so leaning on that vibe is my shit. I play crit builds in like every game I do. I love fake gambling. But that is gonna wrap this up. So, you know, if you like this, like, comment, subscribe, and a massive shout out to my channel members who make all these videos possible. I'm super appreciative. And speaking of, my top tier patrons, my top tier members, that being Drew Standpie, Robbie Beckmeyer, Ultra Mega Jesus, and Czar Shadow. Absolute legends, all of you. Thank you so much. But yeah, that's gonna be it. See ya. You know what? I've talked about necromancy way too much. I'm sick of it. I want to talk about the opposite. Life. This would be a sick tie-in for Mummy the Resurrection. I probably will use the same thing verbatim when I make a video on it. But no, we're jumping over to Mage so we can talk about the Verbena, who focus on life magic. That's their sphere. The Verbena are druids, witches, old wise men, like that specific vibe. that creepy folk mage who lives in a log cabin like 10 minutes out of the village, like that type of vibe. An immediate one I can point at, just off the top of my head, is the Peller from Witcher 3. Full on Verbena. And they are a vibe if you want to go for that like druid, especially like they can wild shape. That is an ability you can do with life. If you want to do that, boom, this is for you. It's not my vibe. I'm a longtime hater of all nature magic, but you do you. Though before we get right into it, I want to say this channel is brought to you by NordVPN. I am affiliated with them, so in my description, you can click my links if you plan to sign up for NordVPN or NordPass. Use my link, it helps the channel, helps me out. More people that do it, the more offers I can get from Nord down the line, so it's greatly appreciated. Anyways, back to Mage. Now, the Verbena trace their history a long time ago. It's like early human history with a group of people known as the Wick. That's Wick with a Y, by the way. The Wick were like Cain to vampires, but for Mage. It's not an exact one-for-one comparison, since like you're not tracing your lineage directly back to these people, but they were the first people to show like that magical powers that you get while awakening. The difference, they were just stupid powerful. They ruled over humanity, and they also acted more like gods, just being able to shape anything. Reality was malleable specifically for them, and they also just went around doing stuff. They became like cool heroes going on epic quests. They fucked a lot and had kids, so they have some descendants, but they guided humanity from the shadows until one day they disappeared. It's not fully known exactly where they went, but there is another Mage the Ascension concept known as the Pure Ones. A lot of different traditions all just point to this old group of people who were like the first made mages. This is going to be a trend going forward for the Verbena, which I'll get into later. After the Wick, it was the Iduna, who were the descendants of the Wick. And these are all like legendary mage figures. Now, a lot of these figures are claimed by different traditions because everyone's like, yeah, I want Merlin in my group, he was part of my tradition. The Verbena claim that characters like Merlin, Morgan Le Fay, Cersei, Lilith, which I find Lilith funny because she's listed as like an Iduna, but she's also claimed to be one of the Wick. I kind of lean into that. You know, I think the Verbena are cooking here because like reading through a lot of the Book of Nod stuff, I can believe Lilith is a mage. I can believe it. But again, that's them claiming to be kind of the first mages on the field, like their specific traditions. Since really, mages quarrel constantly over what is the method of getting ascension, what is the right view on reality. A big view for the Verbena is the idea of life essence and like the energy of things. Magic itself, or quintessence, is literally the life essence of reality, and it's in everything. Quite honestly, that's a pretty broad scope. It's practiced in very like old style ways, a thing I will also get into a lot later, but it's from here that the Verbena claim a bunch of other traditions are sourced from them, as in the Dream Speakers, or the Kha'vadi. They specifically claim that it was Verbena offshoots that went down to the Americas and Africa. And then as well, the cult of Dionysus that started popping up, which then later became the cult of Ecstasy, also is claimed to be from the Verbena. Is this true? Depends who you ask. Later on, they would develop some beef because I'm gonna jump around the history of this. It's not important to get in the nitty gritty, but this is around like the rise of Greece, Italy, and eventually Rome, because they made two big enemies. The first one is the cult of Mercury, which had a really strong base in Rome itself, and then later on, the Messianic Voices. These were the two precursors to the Order of Hermes and the Celestial Chorus. They had beef with the Verbena because they called the Verbena like pagan barbarians. They weren't a fan. The Messianic Voices did this in a very Christian aspect because they got a big boom when Christianity became like a full thing, and the cult of Mercury was really like, ugh, savages. We do proper magic here, being the dicks that they were. Also, this ties in with history because the Verbena were really tied with the Gaul. If you understand Roman history, you understand what happened there. It sucked pretty bad, but it gets worse because the Inquisition was also a big fan of burning them. A lot of witch burnings throughout history were on Verbena mages because they had that big target on their backs practicing like pagan religions and just being looked down upon by like the Christian forces. Also, don't get it twisted, like the Celestial Chorus and the Order of Hermes, they didn't really like each other at all. It was a triangle war more than like, hey, let's team up on that guy. But more shit piled up on the Verbena because the beginning of the Order of Reason started happening. And oh boy, they also didn't like the Verbena. I don't think anybody did. This didn't get fixed even when they joined the order of like the 9 mystic traditions, where they took up the Seat of Life, and were also still hunted by the Inquisition. Though tempers did fall down a little bit, because at some point you're like, we have a bigger threat, we have the Technocracy. It was actually only in like the 1970s that the Verbena had any upside, just any win, because there was a big occultic, esoteric interest boom that happened in the 1970s. This is true. This is actually very true. I'm personally nitpicking a little bit. I think it exploded a lot harder in the 1950s and then the 60s. The books like directly point to 1970s. That is a nitpick. Occultism, esotericism is kind of like my special interest. Shut up, I'll talk about it. But it was in the 1970s that the Verbena, for the first time ever, had a positive number of people joining. People were actually like, oh, okay, I get the vibe. Sick, I'm down. Which their vibe specifically is like the old ways. They are a big fan of older traditions, which like their implements, for example, are all very simplistic, to the point. The more straightforward and less complicated it is, the stronger the magic becomes. These are like broomsticks, wands, cauldrons, ritual knives. For Verbena, they have their own groves. These groves all have a tree, a single tree, that is a representation of the Tree of Life. Just the raw physical manifestation of that concept of like magic, undercurrent, everything, life energy. This tree is stained red with all the rituals that they do. Verbena are totally fine with like sacrifices, either human or animal. However, because of their strong ties to like the idea of life, and they don't really want to hurt things and like cause pain to life, a lot of times these rituals are unto themselves, so they'll like carve runes into their own skin or just do something bloody. Which also, the Verbena have a lot of crossover with Wicca. This is again, my special interest, this type of shit, so sorry. Which it's super clear the actual things pulled to the Verbena from the concepts in Wicca. So I will describe it because I think it makes a stronger picture of who the Verbena are. Which, despite that, Wicca is a hard thing to give a broad definition to, because the practice is very personal. I've actually known these number of people who are practicing, because Wicca is like the biggest modern pagan religion in the world. And this is not me saying pagan disparagingly, this is just an accurate description of what it is. But beliefs can vary, because there are many times godly deities that are put up and like venerated. Oftentimes this is a duology, there's 2 figures, the horn god and the mother goddess. Other times it's more polytheistic, sometimes it's monotheistic, sometimes it's atheist. A big practice that does stick though is magic, actual spellcraft. Now again, the belief in magic varies, because there are people who treat this as like actual spell work, and then there's other people who treat this as like a physical way of manifesting your own goals or ways of self-reflection. Again, I've met people on both spectrums of that. And it's not manifesting as in like, let me summon real quick. It's more like, I'm writing my goals down on a sticky note and putting it on my wall. It's another way of doing that. So yeah, it's a little complicated. I think it is interesting, which are other parallels I'll get into in a second. But I don't know if there's any practicing Wicca in my audience. Feel free to talk about it, because I am coming at it from someone who likes it academically. I personally believe in nothing of the supernatural, but respect it. You do you. A big reason though I went through their history and really focused in on that concept of them practicing the old ways is because I think this paints 2 pictures based on how you view the Verbena, and I guess how nice of a person you are. Because in the like first interpretation I believe you can take, the Verbena are one of the oldest forms of magic practitioners on Earth. They are the source of a lot of things that were later then drawn upon, and there's something to the originator of a practice being really shit on by everyone around. Which makes sense, because there's a big focus on like older traditions and things that were practiced a long time ago and have since dropped with the development of the modern world. Something the Verbena don't really like. They're very peak TV rots your brain, get off your phone, go to the woods. There's a saying in the actual Mage 20 book that I'm paraphrasing, but it's you don't know shit about reality until you walk into the woods with like just your clothes on your back. Then there's the more cynical interpretation, which is this is major code. The Verbena are claiming, well, everyone is around them kicking their ass, like, huh, I was the originator though, you come from me, you're a derivative of me. I think it's an understandable perspective for a group that only had their golden age in 1970. Which part is true? Again, the lore is apocryphal, so probably somewhere in the middle. But with that boom in the 70s, the Verbena have been organizing a lot better. One thing is a lot of people that are coming to join the Verbena are women. because the Verbena historically, not even just modern times, like historically, have treated women better, with more respect, and there's just more women in power. These groups are separated into covens. You can be a Verbena all on your own, but it's more likely you group up. These covens can be numbered in like just special numbers, 13, 9, 7, 3, just numbers with importance. And each coven is led by 2 leaders. These 2 leaders are meant to embody the priest and the priestess. Again, this is why I describe Wicca, because it's the concept of the horned god and the mother goddess. That's kind of the vibe they're taking up for their coven. Though, despite the gender term there being priest and priestess, it actually doesn't really matter what gender you are in becoming one of those leaders. Directly showing from the book, it doesn't really matter what mix of genders people take for those 2 roles. It notes, like, yeah, both leaders can be men, women, transgender people, based as hell, Mage 20th, because, like, the gender's not the point. The point is just embodying a concept and just leading a group, oftentimes much older people. A lot of elder respect, because, like, I think it's really clear, a solid chunk of the vibe for the Verbena are, like, old crone witchcraft. Despite, like, the Nordic representation we get from, like, the Mage 20 book, another great image for the Verbena, the vibe I keep picturing is, like, the classical witch, or literally the Peller from Witcher 3. It's just that's the strong vibe I get from the Verbena. And that vibe I like a lot more. Because, yeah, my bias comes in. I'm not a big fan of, like, druid craft. I've never liked the vibe. So those are the vibes I personally stick on. But the Verbena have a pretty wide range of options because they use the life tree. Life tree is, again, that same concept of everything living is in some way empowered with magic, which is another Wiccan concept. The idea that magic is more like another sense of the human body. It is an element that exists in the world with everything. Life is focused on just anything living, down from like a person, an animal, a virus, like bacteria, like that counts with life. It's just the moment it's not life anymore, it becomes in the matter sphere. But yeah, life is like the way you can transform yourself into a bear if you want a wild shape. You can heal people, you can do a bunch of cool ceremonies to like force evolution. Essentially, do you want to like affect a living thing, like actually magically change it, mess with it, do something? You need some life sphere points. But yeah, overall, like that's the vibe of the Verbena. It's really fun, their specific idea of to the point, very brutalistic, very simple types of ritual craft. Because like, sure, you can do all these funny spell incantations, set up a hyper complicated runic symbol, but you know what has more power in the eyes of the Verbena? Something to the point and something with some emotion into it. As like shows of like passion, high emotion, something that impacts you physically, or I'm also dancing around it slightly, sex. Sex magic is a thing for the Verbena. Maybe I can see the point that the cult of Ecstasy came from them. But this is again something that comes back to like 1900s rise of esotericism, since good old Aleister Crowley. Man, a real freak in the sheets. I don't just mean physically, I also mean magically. Yeah, I think there's a lot of big, interesting vibes you can hit with the Verbena. Like I've kind of been saying, it's not something I would personally play, but the Verbena, honestly, hit that vibe of like Druid, the life sphere, way better than other games. If it came down to it, I am more willing to play a Verbena than I am like a Druid in Pathfinder or D&D. My point being, not my vibe, but if you are a big Verbena fan, I completely understand. I agree. Go off. Do that sick ritual. Hell yeah, man. So yeah, that's it. That's the Verbena. I'd like to shout out my channel members who make all these videos possible. I'm super appreciative. And a huge shout out to my top tier channel members. That being Hazard650, Lucky Finds 23, Pork Chomp, and Czar Shadow. Thank you all so much. Means a lot. I greatly appreciate your membership. But yeah, other than that, join NordVPN today using my links. Join my membership, like, comment, subscribe. Do all the typical YouTube things. See ya. Man, I love covering different extremes because last time I talked about Mage, recently, I talked about the Verbena, who are very focused on life magic, as that is their sphere of influence on the seat of the 9 mystic traditions. The Verbena like to claim that technology and our reliance on it makes us weaker. We should return to nature instead. Alright, sure. Counterpoint though, what if? Nuh-uh. Technology, kinda cool, kinda fun. Is it responsible for some bad things? Yes, 100% for sure. Weapons of mass destruction, an overall decline in mental health due to our over-reliance on social media, really shitty cars, the list goes on and on. But today we're talking about the virtual adepts, who cover the sphere of correspondence. And tech wizards, math wizards. A very new tradition on the scene that believes we can use this technology to help society as a whole ascend. Speaking of technology and the dangers thereof, you probably need cybersecurity. So you should check out NordVPN, an affiliate of the channel. Use my links in the description to sign up for either NordVPN or NordPass. Helps out the channel. I do use this, so it's not just me shilling mindlessly. But yeah, the virtual Adepts belief system is really reliant on technology, as they are techno-mages. However, they're part of the tradition. It's interesting, right? How did this come about? It's because they defected from the Technocracy. For honestly really interesting reasons, which I'll get into in the actual history of the virtual Adepts, I think it is better to talk about the belief system of this group before we get into their history. Otherwise, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, just broad strokes here, because this is Mage the Ascension type writing here, where it's written way more complex than it actually is. Not even saying that Mage lore is hard to follow or read, it's just they write in prose, which is fun, it's part of the style of World of Darkness, but a lot of things are written in prose when they probably should be written just abstractly. To break down a very complicated belief system into the most streamlined, basic understanding I can deliver here. The virtual Adepts believe that everything in the world is information, everything is data. They're often broken down into math wizards because of this. The universe in reality itself is made up of things that are able to be measured, abstracted, they're able to be calculated. And because it is data, and we can do all these things to prove it. Literally, their belief system is provable by the fact that we have such an understanding of physics and in astrophysics, we can actually calculate how a lot of things are going to happen or what has happened. That's all virtual adept proof. And this is a really weird pull. I don't know how many people are going to catch this because I'm not going to look into it. I have no clue how popular this thing is. But when I was younger, when I was a young man, I read a series called Wizard 2.0. First book, Off to be the Wizard. The overall premise of the series is that there is a file that controls the universe. You can open this file and then you'll see data and values for everything. So if you have an understanding of programming, you can actually use this file to edit things in real life. And then the story goes on because the main guy who finds it, much like a lot of other wizards, is chased by the IRS back to medieval England because that's the time when magic is kind of accepted and they pretend to be wizards, when in reality they're just computer programming nerds. The series can be a little bit like Ready Player One, cringy nerd stuff. Reference, it's not as bad. I'll say it holds up better than Ready Player One, to be honest. But I read it when I was younger because it was free on Kindle. But this is actually, the virtual adept belief is that you can edit the world and edit reality through technology. This can be done in a lot of different ways. The key way, though, is through anything that can do calculations. So phones, computers, calculators, abacus, blackboards, you can use all this to cause magic and change reality. You just have to be able to mathematically prove it. It's a fun way of dealing with paradox of showing your work. I would do horrible in this. I suck at math in all regards. There's also a belief system that a lot of newer mages on the scene can wrap their heads around a lot easier, because in our context of the modern world, I am immediately more understanding if somebody programs up a thing, 3D prints a device, I'm all right, shit, fair enough. Then if a guy ran up to me I'm a wizard, fireball, I'd be doubtful. You'd get paradox backlash, but I'd be more doubtful, and I'm more trusting of the technology, because that's what I'm surrounded by. But on to their actual history, and for the most part, we don't know their history. We can speculate, and there's very loose ideas of the very early precursors of the virtual adepts that were around the time of the actual formation of the Technocratic Union, but there are hints that developments such as algebra and calculus, a lot of those moments in history, be it Greek mathematicians, Arabic mathematicians, a lot of that is tracked by these mathematical mages. While they weren't called virtual adepts, or even their other name we'll get to in a second, these can be seen as very early on mages. But eventually the virtual adept precursors were involved in any of those groups that were cracked down on during very heavy religious times. You're doing math and science, that's a bit heretical, eventually forming into secret underground clubs where they can do heretic math. This is also the origin of the Technocratic Union and how they really got started as something combined. Though this group only became a real thing in 1823 with the actual development of the Technocratic Union, where they were known as the Difference Engineers. I think kind of a worse name. A little too similar to Void Engineers. There's a little math joke going in there, but I don't know. They changed it in like 60 years to the Virtual Adepts. Though, in the Technocracy, they weren't liked very much, partially because they were a little too optimistic. They asked too many questions. The big kicker was the World Wars, especially World War II. If you want an understanding of World of Darkness and World War II, I have a whole video on that, because every mage sided with the Axis powers. Basically, it is an easier question to say what mages didn't work with the Axis, and more specifically the Nazis. I can tell you right away, the Chakravanti and the Virtual Adepts, because the Virtual Adepts in Nazi Germany saw a huge crackdown on science and academia in any regard. You have to follow what the state is telling you to tell, even if it's pseudoscience. Especially if it's pseudoscience. There's a really interesting rabbit hole history you can go down there. This was even worse if it was Jewish scientists, and they opposed this. They voiced this opinion and were kind of ignored for it. Meanwhile, the Chakravanti were just straight up executing like Nazi mages, based as hell as always. But things would kind of change with the most influential virtual adept who ever lived, Alan Turing. Yes, that Alan Turing. You know, the father of computer science and also the guy that cracked the Enigma cipher. He was like the first virtual adept who was actively working against the Nazis, and the rest followed suit because he's a cool guy. Alongside this project of going against the Nazis, he also invented virtual reality, alongside the Society of Ether, or the Sons of Ether, a tradition group of mages. The Technocracy didn't like this. This was treason. So they approached Alan Turing and attempted to blackmail him. They would release information that he was gay if he didn't comply. He didn't, that was released. He didn't comply, that was released around the end of World War II, much like our real history. Alongside that information being released, because this was illegal in the UK back in the day, Alan Turing was chemically castrated for the crime of being gay. I think it goes without saying that that's an awful thing. Fuck anyone involved with that. Awful human beings. It's here that sources kind of differ, because the Technocracy, especially the New World Order, claim the normal story. Alan Turing committed suicide after this information was leaked. The Virtual Adepts claim that the New World Order murdered Alan Turing, hid it as a suicide. This is a part where I get a little iffy, because I feel iffy on including a relatively recent historical figure and his like actual story and the shit he went through. I'm conflicted because on one hand, there's a part of me that thinks it's a little bit in poor taste, and then there's the other part of me is like, would he think it's cool? Because the Virtual Adept lore treats Alan Turing really respectfully and with a lot of reverence, as he kind of deserves. This guy is responsible for a lot of important shit in our tech development, so kudos. I can only hope that somehow, if Alan Turing could find out that there was a Mage game, and inside the Mage game were a bunch of tech wizards who like revered him and the work he did, I can only hope you'd be like, oh, that's neat, that's kind of fun. I don't know, I'm conflicted. I don't think there's a right answer to how to feel about this. But after Alan Turing's death, the Virtual Adepts were just completely done with the Technocracy. Alan Turing was made a martyr for them. So they defected to the traditions, at least attempted to, because at first the traditions were like, I don't know, it's a little weird. But at the time they had an open seat for the sphere of correspondence due to the traditions being the traditions and being absolutely horrible to a lot of different groups under their control. Eventually they got put on probation, took the seat of correspondence from the Al-Ibatin, and it took a bit, and people still don't really like them because there's a bit of a baggage of like, you guys used to be a Technocracy, this is a little weird. Also, we like a lot of older magical traditions and religious shit, and you are actively saying it's stupid and cringe. Because the Virtual Adepts believe in progress, because the traditions look backwards, like the word tradition kind of implies. They look back towards the heyday of just magical influence, when instead they could look to the future in their ultimate goal of ascending humanity technologically. Because imagine if a guy named Alan Turing made a virtual reality, a literal space in the Umbra, for everyone to eventually move to and ascend and become perfect incorporeal technological beings. Because that's the goal of the Virtual Adepts. Now, virtual reality, as I've been talking about, is called the digital web. This isn't literally like if you put on your Oculus at home, you're not put inside the Umbra, but this is also a zone, a very specific term for umbral travel, because zone is essentially a place that exists in between different actual umbral spaces. A big example is there's a lot of primordial concepts inside of these. There are zones that are pure fire, pure chaos, pure law. The world of the dreaming from Changeling to Dreaming is inside one of these zones. Anytime you see a werewolf teleport into the Umbra or step sideways, a bit more relevant now, Hunter the Parenting, that is using a zone. They were actually able to do this because of their sphere of correspondence. Correspondence, put on the very, very most basic description that's definitely next to me right now. Correspondence is a sphere of space, of locations, as in manipulating the distance or lack thereof between objects. Putting it very basically, this is what allows you to teleport, or do realmic travel and realmic science. It does have some very fun stuff you can do in it, but essentially if you want to have like a teleport effect or some sort of distance alteration, distance fuckery, it's correspondence. But the digital web is really like a micro universe that is working, building, growing on its own, being developed by different virtual adepts, all in the goal to become a reality 2.0, to be a place where we can transcend to the digital. Just on the surface level, I find that way more interesting than the idea of me transcending existence, becoming a, I don't know, an amorphous blob fart cloud. But this place is developing interestingly because we have the Virgin Web, as it's called, because this place is expanding, where you'll eventually find like a fog wall that is really hazy and is slowly growing, and it grows even better, more clear, as sleeper technology progresses. As Reality 2.0 and the digital web currently stands, it's pretty similar to us just having the internet. Seeing and hearing things, it's great in there. Actually taste, smelling, or feeling is kind of dull. We haven't invented smell-o-vision yet. We should get on that so at least this place can smell nice. Though it also has like corrupted zones, places that have like data damage somewhere in there, and it is a threat. You can like derealize inside of the digital web. There is a threat that if you die in the game, you die for real. Alongside this, you can make your own just locations inside the web. Locations where you have governments over this place, you are building it, you have like admin privileges so you can restrict certain things from happening in your zone, restrict who can come in, and this is where my problems start coming in. Because this is the part in any World of Darkness video, I think it's good to take a step back and remember you're inside the World of Darkness, and the lore in each individual group is written, mostly, by the people it's covering. So this sounds all like really nice, right? Here's my problem. I immediately get warning signs of tech grifter, because some of the ways they talk about Reality 2.0, and granted, this is not intended, because chronologically it kind of couldn't have with the release of like Mage 20th and then Mage Revised. This echoes a lot of things said about the metaverse, a noted crypto scam that is peddled by horseshit artists. And on an extra double note, the underlying subtext I personally get about the whole virtual web is, man, it sounds like I'm gonna have my entire life dictated by a Reddit mod. That sounds awful. Because like there are locations, there's one for Iteration X, they found a way in there, and they have an entire construct that you have to be in some way modified to even step foot in it. And that's just like a bare basic thing. Other places are purely private. Sure, they're like private servers. But the idea, if World of Darkness was real, and my entire life could be dictated by a shitty admin, I'm not a fan of that. I think this could be really shitty, totalitarian, really controlling, and an absolute digital hellscape. Which, personally, I think is a very fun route to take to virtual adepts. Would every single virtual adept believe that? I highly doubt it. However, in the World of Darkness, a lot of these entities, vampires, werewolves, mages, they're people trying to live, and sometimes they're people trying to seek power and influence. So they'll do some pretty shitty things, because this is less of, I think the virtual adepts are bad and evil, and more of, I don't know if I trust their vision. But yeah, that's gonna be it. So first and foremost, I want to thank all my channel members who make all these videos possible. I'm super appreciative, and a huge shout out to my top tier channel members. That being LuckyFind23, LuckyFinds23, Hazard650, Porkchomp, and Czar Shadow. Thank you all so much. It means the world. And then, you know, use the links in my description. Join NordVPN today. Subscribe, join my membership, like, comment, share, do YouTube things. See ya. This feels weird to say, but I hope you got an ad on this video. There's one thing I refuse to do in my videos. I refuse to use that dumbed down TikTok babyified word thing. I'm not gonna say unalived or pew pew for a gun. I'm not doing that. Mainly, I'm a grown-ass man. I would die of embarrassment if I had to unironically say that. As well, I think it's a little weird if I'm covering like a grimdark subject and I like self-censor those words. Imagine how lame it would be to talk about Warhammer and be like, and then the Space Marine unalived the Eldar? What are we doing here? So I bring this all up because of the subject for today. I can't get around it. I'm gonna do my best to keep this video green, but I'm talking about the Cult of Ecstasy, sex mages. I'm talking about sex mages. Though I will die on the hill that this is a complete oversimplification of what the Cult of Ecstasy is. It's what they're most often called and referred to. However, it's not all sex. Is sex involved? Yeah. Is it involved a lot? Yeah. But they have more. They have more stuff going on. The Cult of Ecstasy sit on the seat of time for the 9 mystic traditions. Time is a funny one for them, and as such, it's not the easiest to actually track their history. In maybe controversial opinion, I personally don't think their timeline history of their development as a group matters. I don't think it matters. That is from the source books I read on the Cult of Ecstasy and like the characters' own words. They don't personally believe that their history matters. I think the Verbena and the Cult of Ecstasy share a lot in common. I mean, funnily enough, in my Verbena video I mentioned, they claim to be the origin of the Cult of Ecstasy, but they have really similar concepts. But unlike the Verbena, the Cult of Ecstasy don't have a history of getting their shit kicked in constantly. They just have a history of, aw man, we love divine ecstasy and madness. Ah, damn, the church is a bit on our ass. Obviously, the Celestial Chorus weren't big fans of them. I believe the part that really matters for the Cult of Ecstasy is who they are and what they believe. A main key facet, their entire worldview, their entire paradigm, is around the idea of changing your perspective. Your perspective as a human is limited, so you do things to expand it. Largely, this is done through ecstasy, hence the name. This isn't just like pure pleasure, it is like pleasure, pain, divine worship, just getting super into something. That feeling you get when you get like lost in a thing. Say you're at a really dope concert and you just get taken by the crowd. They're doing a great job, they're hyping everyone up, everyone's going crazy, you're moshing the hell out of there. That is a form of ecstasy. And this has been a tradition for a long time. The actual like history timeline of the Cult of Ecstasy really just follows how human history has had elements of this throughout many different practices, religions, rituals. To explain this, I think I was just going to explain 2 of the really big influences on the Cult of Ecstasy from our real world. The really big obvious one is the Cult of Dionysus. Dionysus had a lot of mystery cults in ancient Greece, and when I say cult, I don't mean it in the same way of like a Jonestown, Heaven's Gate, like that type of cult. Cult in Greek is a Greek word, really comes from just a gathering of people worshiping. The Cult of Dionysus was really into that divine ecstasy. It's the idea that you are doing something, you're experiencing this euphoria, you are ascending yourself to a divine level as you're, a lot of times, you're partying. Other times, it's a lot of divine madness. That is an aspect of Dionysus as a god, who is a very confusing god. You actually track the history of this man. Ways you can reach this are really vigorous ritual dance, really intense music, sex, obviously, drinking copiously, eating good food. There's actually a big thing, a big misconception that the Cult of Dionysus was literally just a bunch of orgies. Another Greek term. But honestly, it wasn't. And as well, the Cult of Dionysus as like a thing isn't a central church practice kind of deal. It is actually a wide-ranging amount of practices over a long period of time in many different locations. There's a good book, actually. It's a little dated, but it's actually good in explaining what the Cult of Dionysus is all about. So forgive my vast oversimplification here. It isn't just Greek influence, though. There's also Indian influence, as there is the Tantra. This is a practice that's done in like Hinduism, Buddhism. It's a long-standing practice. If you've heard of the Kama Sutra, it's on that line. Basically, the concept is through practice of exercise, yoga, really good food, really good parties, sex is involved. You are creating a link to the gods. A god will be like, damn, they're having a good time. I'm gonna like check that out. And you kind of link in that moment. Basically, as a human being, you're praising a god in some way in these practices, and then a god is like, I'm gonna bless you later. It is actually a really interesting practice. I am super into like mysticism and religious history. My weak spot is Eastern religion and Eastern mystical practices. I need to read more into this. I actually learned about this from this video. And there are a lot more influences too, as there are so many practices that have just moments where you're taken in by a ritual, dance, and performance. A lot of rituals that involved hallucinogens. Basically, if you can track that throughout history of our world, the Cult of Ecstasy history is just, yep, I was there. It's actually funny. In like one of the tradition books for the revised edition, this is literally told in character by an ecstasy mage making this dude hallucinate through time with incense. And it is like just showing all of these kind of practices and being like, yeah, we were there. We did that shit. Basically, the Cult of Ecstasy believes underneath the world, this underlying current is reality. Quintessence as well. This magic underlying of just what reality actually is. It is something our mind, our senses blocks out, because if you saw it, you would go insane. It is just primal beauty and terror. It's just an indescribable thing you are looking at. To get glimpses of it, you have to expand your mind. And there's a lot of ways you can do this. The three main ways that are really mentioned with the Cult of Ecstasy is sex. You get that post-nut clarity. You drop some acid with like drugs. So it is interesting the Cult of Ecstasy has their own internal ranking system of drugs, because they have some where they're like, that's a good one. That's a starter one. You should maybe start with that. And then some that are like, this is just bad. Don't do this. You get nothing out of it. It just, I don't know, you take a fat bong rip and then you see reality in front of you. And then music. Music is a big aspect of them as well. So quite literally, the Cult of Ecstasy is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Which is funny because the 60s and 70s were like their heyday with like the hippie movement. They had a great time, and then it ended like really hard, and they were like, fuck, no one wants to just drop acid in the desert anymore, damn it. The actual seeing of reality itself is called Lakashim, and it is the most important thing for an ecstasy mage. They will do anything to see it. Even if they've seen it once, they need to see it again. It is something they must do. Though it isn't all LSD and rainbows, because the Cult of Ecstasy is noted by other mages of being one of the most dangerous types, because they're unpredictable and not great with boundaries. The Cult of Ecstasy really likes to hang around with sleepers. They're a big fan of hanging out with mortals, and especially helping mortals reach that awakened state. They want you, if you're ready, willing, and able, to see what reality actually is, and they'll help you do that by partying. So they like having a lot of influence around people, and also it's fun to sue them. To get around this, because it can get bad real fast, they have like a literal 10 commandments of like the Code of Ananda, which I'm not gonna full go through all 10 of them. Essentially, it is really taboo to force another person to go through this like altered perception. If someone doesn't want to trip balls with you, don't spike their drink. Some people aren't ready to awaken, some people like being asleep, and you've got to get their consent first. As well, don't warp these practices, don't warp this into just pain for pain's sake. That is a very evil act, to warp this, what should be a very divine experience, into something bad. Which is a reason they have a list of do not do these drugs. And it is important because, remember, this is the world of darkness. And as much as we have these codes, and there's a lot of groups in WoD that are very noted to be good and have good intentions, there's individuals who are definitely not. There are definitely Cult of Ecstasy mages who are like, whatever. Life's for the living, consent just gets in the way. And that makes them bad and dangerous, obviously. Though the actual tradition will crack down on you very hard for breaking these rules. They do all this without even having like a super rigid structure. They're honestly really loose. The only thing they care about is following the code. Though it did take quite a bit of work to get there. This is the one bit of like real history of the tradition I'm going to get into, because it rules and is important. Because the Cult of Ecstasy, the original form, was known as the Seers of Kronos. Greek-inspired, obviously. They were led by a dude, like at the time, around the 1400s, by a dude named Shazar. Now, Shazar is an absolute legend. Just get in the comments. Everyone give a hell yeah to Shazar right now. He's so sick. Because Shazar, obviously, they have the power of time, which we'll get into in a second. He actually foresaw the Technocracy being a thing. He saw that the Order of Reason was literally starting. And he's like, this is bad. This is really bad, actually. So he got off his ass and told every mage he knew, all the big masters of magic. He's like, we need to get together and do something. This is, oh no. It took him effort to get all these people to agree, because mages don't like working together. After a lot of debate, They formed the Council of the Nine Mystic Traditions. Shazar's the guy that made that happen. He wasn't the leader of it because he just got on the seat of time. Obviously, Seers of Kronos, who knew? The big reason he got the council to do this anyways is because he also realized the mages aren't going to do this themselves. They aren't going to just be left alone, and they're not going to deal with this really real threat I just saw in the future. He accumulated a lot of political power, so he could force all of these people to do the right thing. He didn't like the idea. He doesn't like the idea of manipulating and using this political might as threats, basically, but he did what had to be done. Then, right after, he went back to his boys. He did a lot more debate, because he realized his own tradition could do a lot of bad, and they needed to stand tall in front of the technocracy. So he created the Code of Ananda. Absolute legend. He's so sick. I think it's fair if you read a lot of the lore for the Cult of Ecstasy and saw that they had time as their sphere. You're like, what? Why time? Honestly, that's not the one I'd immediately think. I would think maybe correspondence or life. It's a lot of traditions of like mediums seeing the future, literal like crystal balls, scrying in a pool, things like that. And I think this sounds like it doesn't fully track with the ecstasy thing, but I've found some really fun explanations of it, and I think it does track still though. Like my gut is like, I feel like they should have life magic, maybe something. It is because they are mages that are all about your perspective, and time is a perspective. Granted, it's really hard to go back. You can look back in time, that's easier. And World of Darkness is really hard to travel backwards in time, and even worse to change it, because that is always explicitly vulgar magic. So Paradox doesn't like it, but a good way of explaining it is this time magic is basically you are expanding your perception to even transcend time. You are able to see something before it happens, which gives you the context of what you can do in the now. Like quite literally, let's say you hit a bong rip and you realize, ah, damn, this guy who's gonna attack me, he has a gun in his right pocket. Now I can utilize this with another magic sphere to alter the event that will come forward. And obviously, because it's time magic gets really fucky real fast. Because besides, you know, just seeing in time, you can also like rewind yourself. You can put something into the future. There's elements you can do. If you get to dot 5, which is the crazy dots that you get to, max magic, it references, you just become Doctor Who. It's literally like the Doctor Who effect. You exist outside of time. Have fun figuring that out, GM. Enjoy. The real power is when you meld it with other things. Because, for example, you meld time with correspondence, now you can just alter something a different way. Maybe you can move like a tornado to another state. Or, uh-oh, I used my time magic and forces and I just shunted a fireball 10 minutes from now. Sucks, parry that, idiot. I think the Cult of Ecstasy is very cool. If I had to play them, I would probably be going all in on the drug part because, I guess, fun fact for me, I'm not gonna roleplay out sex with my friends. I'm really uncomfortable with like romance or anything even remotely like that in my tabletop game because I'm talking to a friend of mine and I don't see them that way, and that's weird. But time is fun. Time is fun. I haven't seen time rules since I played Anima Beyond Fantasy. A very good game. Such a good game. But it also has insane magic on time to where the limiting factor in Anima for doing too much with time is that there is a organization in space that tracks this, known as like the Illuminati, and they will kill you. You do too many time crimes and a fucking Terminator's coming after you. But anyways, that is it. That's gonna be about the Cult of Ecstasy. And first, I want to shout out my channel members who make all these videos possible. Thank you so much. And I want to give a huge shout out to my top tier channel members, that being Lucky Finds 23, Porkchomp, and Czar Shadow. Thank y'all so much. It means a lot. Yeah, other than that, like, comment, subscribe, share, I don't know, do whatever you want, YouTube stuff. See ya. World of Darkness is one of those games that doesn't really have like a strong sense of class archetype or even like group archetypes that you're fulfilling. There's not your fighter, your wizard, your thief. In this game, it's just you're picking a character you want to play. If we had to deal with actual team composition for World of Darkness, then Salubri would be in every single vampire game since they are one of the only few routes to do healing. Who knows, maybe that's why they became a full clan in 5th edition. But if you were trying to say play a cleric or a paladin in Mage the Ascension, you'd pick Celestial Chorus. Slight obtuse way to get into the point, but today we're talking about the religious mages, the Celestial Chorus. Their entire methodology of magic is around religion, and specifically, they really exalt the One. Now, who is the One? Well, it's God, like capital G God. Does that mean it's the Christian God? Yes and no, because the Celestial Chorus is seen as very Christian, because that's their history. Their history is predominantly Christian, but that's not to say it's not all that, because Abrahamic faiths are in there and even some polytheistic faiths, because the main important thing you gotta deal with is the One. The One is some form of God being, the creator of everything, and inside of all of us is that spark of the divine. The One left its mark on every single person. That is your avatar. So the goal is pretty simple. You ascend by getting closer to the One, and also you help guide sleepers out of that state so they can awaken. The One is portrayed in a couple different ways, and I prefer one of them. The one I don't prefer is there's a creation myth that is talking about how the One shaped the world into existence through that of song, which you might have heard of if you're a Lord of the Rings nerd, because it's kind of that. It's really similar. You have an entire chorus of things creating into existence, and then, oh no, you have a discordant melody, and that person gets outcasted. It's just, instead of that being the first Dark Lord in a World of Darkness, that's the Nefandi, which is an insane thing. And also there's a Finnish creation myth that is really similar. It's more than likely the thing Tolkien took inspiration from. The one I prefer actually heralds more to an old Christian concept, where the One is treated as the One. It is creation, which there's an old style of Christianity that we've kind of lost in our day-to-day lives because God as a figure has been personified. A lot of very early Christians didn't view God as this nice, kindly old man in the clouds. They viewed God as creation. Everything has a part of him, and so the idea that, oh man, God doesn't exist, it's just kind of crazy, because you look around, that's proof. And I bring this up because I've been reading a book on Gnosticism. It's very good, you should read this. A lot of the early arguments that created this style of Christianity are straight up the exact same arguments modern day people are using for atheism. Like, if God good, why bad things happen is literally a proof of Gnosticism, because they decree, yeah, why would God be jealous and spiteful in the Old Testament? That doesn't make sense. Slight tangent, I know, but that is the interpretation of the one I prefer. I enjoy the idea of World of Darkness having this being that is something. It is out of our realm of comprehension. It's outside. There is something there. Is it fully Christian? Probably not. Are there a lot of elements of Christianity that are built off of something real? 100%. Because I like the idea of World of Darkness having a lot more kernels of truth that are warped by perception. I think it's a more interesting world to examine it that way, which is at least my take. You can have your own. It's World of Darkness, do what you want. I hit that too because this is an element where I can talk a little bit more about true faith. True faith, for those that don't know, is a concept of World of Darkness. It is one of the few ways a normal mortal human can do something supernatural. It's through the sheer act of faith itself. Again, that doesn't just mean the Christian God. If you are truly, honestly faithful, you can do things that are otherworldly, like turning away the undead, turning away magic itself. You can help negate it. Now, specifically, bring this up because celestial choristers have a theory with evidence, like they're not completely wrong about this, that they notice when people utilize true faith, they're literally channeling something. There is something that is giving it access to that power, which again hits my theory and my preferred method of the idea of the one, where the idea of the divine and divinity is something otherworldly tied with mortals that has the ability of negating the supernatural. Or you can go with one of the other methods. They talk about the one, where they talk about it as an actual being. Specifically, that story of singing the world of creation, the one is treated as very feminine, a feminine creator of some form that is everything. Also, again, it's not all Christian because the creation myth is really nothing like you get in the Bible. They allow polytheists in, they allow a lot of other religious people in nowadays. Not to say it was all happiness and sunshine and rainbows. It's just that the idea of the one is singular. It's a monotheistic being, so you would think. Because yeah, polytheists are inside of this tradition because they simply believe, well, yeah, there are many gods that I revere and worship, but they're all part of the one. They are all different faces of it. But yeah, honestly, fair enough, man, sure. It's the reason I haven't gone into the history yet, and I'm still just talking about what the one and what they believe actually is, because this is one of those factions, I believe, in WoD, where the concept of what they are is a little bit more important by the play-by-play history, and largely because the history just really goes in a line of a lot of human stuff. So if you have a basic understanding of the development of humanity, you know most of their lore. The actual Celestial Chorus utilize a few different tools to get their magic, and they're all really just elements of religion and performance, because Celestial Chorus implies song, hence the creation myth idea of it being song. The idea of singing, be it, I don't know, hymns or being Christian rock. So is like reading scripture. So is prayer. So is like good deeds and kind acts. All those methods of devotion. It's ways of expressing your appreciation for the one in the creation that you're inside of. On the other hand, you can do it the other way. You could fast, you could make yourself a martyr, you could flagellate yourself. These are all ways you can also try to separate your physical to become more close to the divine. It's why I describe them as you can go cleric or you can go paladin, because the ways you can actually utilize their magic and utilize their builds isn't just, oh, let me be nice and comforting and play a healer, even though I don't have immediate aptitude in the life sphere. Their sphere is prime, which I'll get to later. Because you can utilize your magic to help and support people, or you could use that power to destroy the evil things that go bump in the night. But I will relatively quickly go on to the history of them. I know, I'm like late in the video, but I'll do it. There are two big things when it comes to the Celestial Chorus that are important. I'm going to speed run this, but they have the idea of many different ages that they've lived in. The first one is, I think, the most important concept to lay down, where it is that creation myth of singing the world into existence. Two things. First one is the idea of the pure ones. The pure ones are a thing mentioned pretty often in traditions. It's the ancient mages that used to exist a long time ago when magic was very open. Pure ones and their direct descendants are a lot of like very big magical historical figures, like Morgan Le Fay, Circe, Lilith is rumored to be one, fucking Merlin, all those mages, and every single tradition says, no, that's ours. He was one of us. But the pure ones are, to make a very basic analogy, the Cain of mages. It's from them that the Avatar became a thing. And when it comes to the Celestial Chorus, they treat the pure one as angels sent here, when eventually they got shattered. It's not fully known how they got shattered, though it seemed to be through a great war, a war with people who became discordant of the music of creation, hence the Nefandi, which implies the Nefandi were around from like literally the very beginning. When the world was created, there were some mages who were like, you know what, fuck this. I hate this. Is this completely true? I view this in the same way I do every other WoD thing. I think there's a nugget of that's probably true, but on the other hand, it's a thing the traditions love to do, in its claim, oh yeah, we were like the main true one that everyone broke off of. So of course you would say the main enemy is actually your enemy from the start. But the idea of religion and the idea of worshiping something and getting your power through faith isn't something crazy new. It isn't something that was super codified, but the first appearance of something that was resembling the Celestial Chorus popped up in Egypt, as the first real push for the ideas of Celestial Chorus came up with Amenhotep IV, who really revered Aten and viewed this as a monotheistic sun god that we should only worship. And this is because in WoD, Amenhotep said he had a vision in the desert after fasting for a long time, where Aten told him his job was to collect people that were similar to him and help guide the sleepers out of their sleep. Which it doesn't expressly say, but it sounds like Amenhotep IV was a wizard. That's fun. But through this was that core idea of the singular being, a monotheistic being that you revere, and it became a more codified group, where more and more it started gathering and picking up steam, especially once Christianity got into the mix. Obviously, the idea of the Abrahamic religions in general all having a very monotheistic religion, that helped a lot, but Christianity was like the main horse that they hitched. Even more when Charlemagne became full Christian. That was like the heyday of the Celestial Chorus. And it was here that it was the most difficult if you had a different faith. There was a group code known as the Cabal of the Pure Thought that had the idea of we need a codified set of beliefs. We can't just be a bunch of different disparate thoughts that are unified. We need to unify under a core dogma. There were a lot of people that really resonated with the ideas but weren't Christian, so they got pushed out. Though this had to change eventually, because the moment the Order of Reason came on the scene, they started getting their ass beat. The Order of Reason jumping on the scene caused more issues, because their entire thing is unifying the world in the consensus of logic, reason, dogma against the belief of the supernatural or anything spiritual. And then you have the Inquisition. Like the Inquisition that fucked up the vampires. Because this is around the time of like the Protestant Reformation, the schism in the church. Christianity was splitting rapidly, and the Inquisition was hampering down on things they viewed as heretical. And it's pretty obvious that the Order of Reason definitely pointed some inquisitors to make problems for the mages. And it kind of just got worse. There was a lot of infighting. There was a lot of people just leaving the Celestial Chorus because it was too much of an issue. And it really came to a head with the Week of Nightmares and the Avatar Storm, which cut off all of the higher-ups and all the elders of their order. Where now, fuck, our like spiritual leaders, we can't talk to them anymore. They were having such a bad time. It's around here in like the 1999 where they realized, all right, fuck, we might need to open our shit up again. We might need to be more accepting. They already had younger mages who were more down with variants of thought. But now with all of the old guard gone, they're like, well, fuck it. I mean, come on in, gang. Yeah, sure, you're many different faces of the one. Hell yeah, brother, let's do some magic. That's not to say, again, it's not all peachy keen. There are still people who are annoyed. It's WoD, it's a WoD faction. There's degrees of this person's actually nice, this person's a giant jackass. There are bigger fish to fry than their theological debates. They can resume it once the Technocracy is dealt with, once the Nefandi is dealt with, and all the many other issues plaguing the world of darkness. Lastly, I will touch on the idea of Prime. Prime is a very important sphere of magic. Prime is essentially the power of quintessence itself. This is a sphere that is treated with a lot of reverence, not just because they're religious, but because it is essentially the thing that magic has to go through. You're using forces, you have to tap into Prime in some regard. Prime is the ability to create something from nothing. The entire world is made up of, in their heads, the divine. In others, quintessence and just this magical energy that is reality. With Prime, you are able to actually shape raw reality itself. As such, it can do things that other magic spheres just can't do, like enchant items, enchant people. If you want to like actually affect something or someone on a deeper level, you need to use Prime. In the same way, if you want to make something out of nothing, you need Prime. On the absolute highest sphere though, the highest dot of Prime, you can actually undo paradox. As again, you control reality, you can shape it, you can just warp reality around you to negate a paradox backlash. But yeah, that's a good overview of the Celestial Chorus. First and foremost, I want to shout out my channel members who make all these videos possible. Super appreciative. And I want to give a huge shout out to my top tier channel members. That being Eric Sheriff, Megas Cauldron, Porkchomp, and Czar Shadow. Thank you all so much, it means a lot. Like, comment, subscribe, join membership. I'll be making more wizard videos more than likely soon. I'm on a wizard kick, it's fun. But see ya. It's high time we talk about some tech mages, but let's put a little twist on there. I'm not talking about the sleek technology of the Technocracy or virtual reality. I'm talking about steampunk. I'm talking about mad scientists, because today we're going to be talking about the Society of Ether. Not their original name. Their original name used to be the Sons of Ether. Just for clarity's sake, I am going to be referring to them as the Society of Ether, but that is a name change they got in Mage 20th. You know, use what you want, I guess. And the only other bit, I had to talk about this like right now, right before we start. The Society of Ether has some of the most fun art and the most whiplash art I've ever seen from Mage. Because on one hand, you got the very normal overview idea of their aesthetic, steampunk. Then you also have some shit that's full out of Warhammer for one of their like key characters. And then what is possibly my favorite new art piece for World of Darkness, this thing. I'm a huge fan of this little monkey man. But the Society of Ether's entire ethos is science. They love the idea of science and scientific progress. Take a wild guess who they were with before they joined the 9 Mystic Traditions. There is just still a key difference. While this is elements of science and progression, there is a part here that separates it from some of the other groups that have had the same theming. The one that's really interesting is this is all like esoteric historical sciences. The big one that prevails all of this and their methodology is actually medieval alchemy. This inspiration of alchemy actually goes to their early history, as the first Society of Ether proto-members were those who found a document called the Kitab al-Alasir, which is Arabic, obviously, but it was an old Greek text written by a dude named Aretus, not Atreus, Aretus, who wrote it on like fleeing from Troy. And if we're gonna pull a real historical figure, or at least a named story figure, there is a prince of Troy that was named Aretus. So maybe it's him. The book was well ahead of its time and very clearly written by someone who was a mage. But what this book talks about is a mysterious fifth element. The elements being, you know, the normal earth elements, earth, water, fire, air, but then the fifth one, ether, which I will get to a little later. Kitab al-Alasir was found by a man named Lorenzo Golo. He spent a lot of time and a lot of effort working his ass off trying to translate, trying to decipher, and trying to understand the writings in this book. Even going so far as to hang out with Hermes mages, and then he promptly left and formed his own faction. Luck would finally hit because he found another scholar, a Knights Templar by the name of Simon de Laurent, who actually found the Greek version of the same manuscript and was, as a Knight Templar, doing his best to decipher and find more out about this book. When they came across each other, they realized, oh, we can just work together. But still, they weren't Etherites. They had their own little group, their own little faction that they were working just to understand this book and this idea of the fifth element of ether. However, progress would get halted. Lorenzo Golo was killed in an experimental airship. It just exploded on him. And Simon de Laurent was actually excommunicated and hunted down by the church for his esoteric dealings. And this would really hit their group as they were really in that older idea of science. But there was one group that came to pick up the pieces, a group known as the Order of Reason. There is one part I really have to shout out when it comes to the Society of Ether. I really like how kind of tight their history is. It's not going too crazy, it's not going too far, it's just two people interested in the same science and like coming together to learn, and other people gathering around because they're just interested in learning and learning for science's sake. It's weird saying this World of Darkness, but it's really grounded, and that's neat. I certainly hope it stays grounded. The proto group that would join the Order of Reason was later named the Electrodyne Engineers, and now I think we gotta talk about their actual methodology and their beliefs. Because like I said, science, it's all about science. However, that sleek, repeatable, testable, safe science, that's cringe, that's stupid. Science is unpredictable, it's chaotic, and it should be really cool and interesting and have archaic tech to it. It is that vibe of old adventurers, old scientists, like mad scientists. It is the difference of, oh, let me build a nice junction box so we can flow the electricity better, we need more voltage, to I'm going to use a literal storm to bring this body back to life. I fully believe Dr. Frankenstein was a Society of Ether made. The big thing that pins their beliefs is the idea of ether. Ether, the mysterious fifth element, was a legitimate belief way back in the day. It is the idea that there has to be some substance that is in between things. Old scientists and philosophers believed in ether, which was a literal substance that all the stars and planets were in. You look up into space, that's not void, there's a literal thing. It's not water, but it's different. The same concept transfers to our world's development of the idea of quintessence. Quintessence in Mage means something a little different, but quintessence and ether are kind of the same thing. There was just a belief that light could not travel through like a vacuum or something. It had to flow into and be pulled by something, that being essence or quintessence. In fact, some ideas of quintessence were actually laid out by Plato, and his belief was that the Earth had a really low amount of quintessence. So this is why like the planets and stars had such an effect on us as people, because there was a draw of quintessence. But the big kicker is alchemy, because it was believed using ether or quintessence, you could transmute something into another substance, alter matter in some way. That is their sphere. Their sphere is matter, so that's the seat on the 9 mystic traditions they currently sit on, and that is like their key magic sphere, which is literally for transmutation. It allows you to turn one substance to another, it allows you to alter the form of something. If you want to alter a form of a living thing, you'll need like a couple spheres of life, but you could literally like turn a pumpkin into a carriage. That is something matter will let you do. Also, secondarily, if you're a big fan of Full Metal Alchemist, this is the tradition to play, because they view magic in the same way they did in Full Metal Alchemist. It is a science, it is a process, it is a thing you learn and develop. So if you want to cosplay Edward Elric, you go Matter Mage and you play a Society of Ether Mage. That's how you do it. I just think that element is important. It's something I want to hammer in more and more in my Mage the Ascension videos. When we think about magic, I think we go to like spells and books and staves and wands. And the really important part of Mage is that no, it's a literal different methodology and belief system that affects you changing the world. Unless you're a Hermes mage and a hermetic, casting spells, saying incantations doesn't really do much. I'll make an analogy, Dresden Files. I really like the Dresden Files, it's very World of Darkness. There are two characters I'll point out. Harry Dresden, he is 100% a hermetic Hermes mage. That's his whole shit. He says magic words, he's got staves, he's got wands, he's got runes, he's got all of that. But another character that I think would count as a mage in World of Darkness is Michael, a dope character. He is a Grail Knight. His sword was actually forged with one of the nails that Jesus was crucified with. He is a holy warrior. a very devout man. And in the Dresden Files, God works in mysterious ways, which is a funny way of saying there are miracles that can happen, and the most tangible way this comes about is God will actually push you into places where you're needed, because God works in mysterious ways. He is 100% a chorister. That belief that God is tipping the scales in your favor, he's helping the faithful, he's strengthening your resolve, this is very, very chorister coded. That's the thing. As in Dresden Files, Michael does not feel like a mage. He feels like a guy, like a Templar, like a paladin. He feels like that, who is just empowered by God. But that's how the choristers feel. In the Society of Aether's entire thing is science. It is that ramshackle science where the picture I have in my head is if you ever watch Doctor Who, whenever he's piloting the TARDIS and he's just running around doing random dumb bullshit. Like that is very Aetherite. But back to their history, because they would be aligned with the Order of Reason for a hot minute. However, they just kept having issues. The Aetherite mages believed that science as a concept was there to progress humanity. It was something that we needed to prove and show and eventually become fully public with. The thing is, they were really progressing the timetable and doing this in ways that the Technocracy didn't like. For example, a very big line in the sand that happened really early. The feud between Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. Because the Technocracy backed Edison. It was a smoother technology, he was slightly more normal, but this was the future of science that the Technocracy wanted. However, the Aetherites really liked Tesla. They liked his ideas, which were very kooky and very weird. He was just also a crazy guy. I don't think he was malicious, he was just a fucking weirdo. But that was the science they preferred. As well, the Technocracy sided with Albert Einstein. And this, again, rankled them because the Technocracy believed that science should be controlled and just orderly, something they can impose on consensus. When Aetherites pushed back, the Technocracy responded by fully publicly ripping their shit out of consensus. Sorry, ether actually doesn't exist. We just proved that it doesn't exist. All those ancient science is now out of favor. That was the Technocracy's doing, directly punishing the Society of Aether. It kept happening so much that it was like around the 1900s is when the Society of Aether joined up with the 9 mystic traditions, taking the seat of matter, which was a great get and finally one of the big first hits against the Technocracy, because now the traditions had a full insight into how the Technocracy operated. However, in the 1900s, it's time. I gotta talk about Tsar Vargo. I'm certain you might actually know this story already, or at least a very accelerated Cliff Notes version, if you've seen Alpha Boosa's really good Primer on World of Darkness. Originally, he was known as Vargo Xantrata, and he was a Society of Aether mage. He was super big in the idea of progressing humanity and using science for good. He hated the idea of using his science for weapons, which is what the Technocracy kept doing, and he kept getting more and more pissed. Until 1914, where suddenly, out of nowhere, an army of Zeppelins and robots came, as Tsar Vargo declared to every world government, cede all of your control to me. I will become the benevolent leader of mankind in what we need to do, and we will end World War I right now. This is a huge leap. This is a huge, obvious, magical leap. It's insane. So the Technocracy struck back really hard with their own robots and biohumans and all that shit. Until eventually Tsar Vargo did die. And this is just a really goofy fact I found out. The guy that probably killed Tsar Vargo is Michael Faraday. Yeah, that Michael Faraday. He was a mage. He was a tried and true believer of the Technocracy, and after Tsar Vargo died, supposedly, Michael Faraday was just gone. No one knows where he went. And I say supposedly for Tsar Vargo because there are rumors that he's still out in the Umbra sailing with his robot fleet. And in one of the Apocalypse timeline, the End of Time, specific run for Mage, there is one of these scenarios where Tsar Vargo actually comes back and gives humanity one last chance to join him and make him their benevolent leader. So it depends on you if you want to really run this storyline if Tsar Vargo's still alive. I think it's funny, the idea of him sailing around in the Umbra. That's just a fun little tidbit there. Though that wasn't the last hit that the Aetherite mages took, even though technically it's not fully on the faction, that's on one guy. Well, in World War II, I have a whole video on World War II in WoD. In World of Darkness, it is easier to talk about the factions that didn't ally themselves with the Axis than it is to mention those that didn't. The Society of Aether was kind of split in half because half of them just immediately didn't like the Axis and especially the Nazis. Not because of what they were doing, but because they didn't like that Hitler, the SS, and all that were getting into esoteric bullshit. They wanted technology and science to be the forefront. Meanwhile, the other half were like, whatever, he can keep doing his weird magic bullshit. There is a lot of weird esoteric shit that Hitler was definitely trying to do. It's not even like conspiracy shit, it's like real. It's very goofy and a fun rabbit hole you can dig down. But again, you can just watch my World War II video for the actual history when it comes to Mage and how that all went down. But either way, that was a big hit. And it's only like recent time that they've been doing all right. But as they currently stand, they are just an interesting bunch of science mages who just like the more archaic parts of tech, the things that are outdated. And just, there's a couple of sub-factions that hit the vibe of what they are. There are utopians. Utopians are those who believe really hard in their idea that science is a moral good for reality. They're the ones that hit really hard that science should be making the lives of every person better. One of the ways you'll see that is Utopian Society of Ether Mages will often be in different social sciences. They're also full mad scientists as like a group. Mad scientist mages are very much in that like ends justify the means. Again, very Dr. Frankenstein. They don't care about the morals of what they're doing. They care about the science. And on that, like adventurers, there's Euthanatos, those that actually sail the Umbra. So there's a lot of vibes here. It's really clear. Steampunk and very like old sci-fi like pulp adventure stories. Like the big one that pops out, it's a really clear inspiration for this group, is just the books and writings of Jules Verne. 40,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Around the World in 80 Days, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Fun fact, Tsar Vargo, his story mirrors a Jules Verne story called Robert the Conqueror, where basically that's what happened in his story. What happened with Tsar Vargo, how he declared himself leader with a bunch of airships. It's that specific vibe. And if you want to hit that vibe, you play this. I think it's really fun. I'm not a huge steampunk guy, admittedly. Not fully my aesthetic, but like I respect it a lot. I understand why a lot of people in my comments are huge fans of them. Even with the Tsar Vargo joke, I fully say that I think the Society of Ethers actually history and progression is one of the more tightly written ones I've come across. It's not too expansive, it's not too huge, it hits like in couple little bubbles of like what's going on at what time, but also not being too vague that you're just lost in what's going on. It's very, but that is going to be it. So first and foremost, I want to thank my channel members who make all these videos possible. And a huge shout out to my top tier channel members, that being Eric Sheriff, Meg's Cauldron, Porkchomp, and Czar Shadow. Thank you all so much, it means a lot. But yeah, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, membership, YouTube things. See ya. For those of you who lean more Werewolf the Apocalypse, I have some good news for this subject. Because we're talking about spirits. Someone has to commune with all these gosh dang spirits. Well, that is the Kha'vadi when it comes to Mage the Ascension, or the Dream Speakers. That is their original name. It was a name change for Mage 20th. I lean very heavily 20th anniversary for my World of Darkness. That is what I'm going to default to, unless I am talking about historically when they would be called the Dream Speakers. I don't really care which one you use, so if you really, really hate the idea of calling them Kha'vadi, just pretend I'm saying Dream Speaker every time. But the Kha'vadi are shamans, and with a pretty wide history. So wide that I can't start it like this is when everything was set in place, because the Kha'vadi are made up of so many different groups. There are a lot of similarities when it comes to the early traditions of Mage the Ascension, where there's oftentimes stories of the Pure Ones. Pure Ones, very, very loose analogy here, are kind of like the Cain for vampire, but for mages, because the Pure Ones are like the uber cool wizards, basically kind of gods, who all their avatars come from. The idea of some powerful entities, be gods, demigods, heroes, whatever, is super, super common throughout all of human history and all of human religion, so it fits in pretty loosely. For anything actually codified and set in stone, we have to jump to 1466 for that great convocation that created the 9 mystic traditions. 1466 is when they actually became a codified group of the Dream Speakers, codified very loosely, but I'll get to it, with the 2 founders that were leading this tradition, put right away on the seat of spirit. These 2 founders were Niobe, an African dream priestess, and Star of Eagles, a Powhatan medicine man who they met just kind of coincidentally on the other side in the spirit world, the Umbra, whatever you want to call it, because Niobe was dealing with a great plague that was impacting Zimbabwe way back in the day, like 1200s. She went on a big quest to go solve this issue, and at the same time, Star of Eagles was grounded in the Umbra on his own spiritual journey. They met, decided let's work together. I mean, it's a pretty rare occurrence, it's gotta be. and over time they fell in love and actually got married. Something that would symbolically hold together the Dream Speakers when they first started, because the Dream Speakers are made up of a massive range of groups, like an insane mix. I am talking like different African cultures, I'm talking Australian Aboriginals, I'm talking Native Americans, both from North and South America, I'm talking the Maui, I'm talking many different Polynesian groups, and way more. My point is, I don't need to go through every single one, but it is a lot, which is kind of their organizational structure, because the Dream Speakers aren't actually like a traditional tradition, they're not like a big old faction, it's more like treating extended family, and every single Mage group has like different sub-factions and subgroups. For the Dream Speakers, the Kha'vadi, it is actually all different cultures that they descend from, since all these regions have very different practices. The one aspect that pins all of this together is the idea of spirits. Communing with spirits, working with spirits, the idea that things have spirits, that is the pinning point for this group. And there's no point dancing around it. I'm not intending to, I'm gonna be very upfront with this. The whole reason that the Dream Speakers were made like this is due to racism, in-universe racism. Now wait, hold up. Sorry, I have a Pavlovian response to make sure the comments don't get annoying because I said something vaguely woke. This isn't some like meta thing I'm analyzing here. I'm talking about the lore, and I'm also gonna take this moment to address a thing I was wrong about in other videos. The Dream Seekers, when they were created in 1466, was essentially many of the European traditions needed something to go against the Technocratic Union, which is really getting bad. There are many different mage practices, and they had a seat available. So what they decided to do was go around, literally travel around the world, and find anybody that they would label as ethnic magic. Do you have a loose idea of spirits or communing with them or animism, any of this shit? Well, haha, you're now in one giant group. This is expressly because they didn't want to deal with actually learning all these different cultures and putting them in their own little categories. They just really wanted to lump a bunch of foreign ideas into one group so they could manage it. The part I want to correct, actually, is I've been under the assumption, and I've heard this around too, that this is a retcon, in that this idea is I still think, if it works like this, a really clever retcon to take something meta, like the designers way back in the day did this. They were just like, I don't know, it's not European magic, it's not Asian magic, toss it in one category. And like, it kinda is, but I still wouldn't feel comfortable labeling it as like a full retcon, because like, let me put it this way. The only edition that talks about the Dream Speakers and doesn't include this mention of the organization of them into one group being racist is first edition, 1993, first edition. As you can see, there's not a mention of anything about the clear xenophobia of doing this. Though also a fun mention, again, for werewolf fans. It does name drop Gaia here, and it really goes into the same ideas with werewolf. But then when we get to 1995 for second edition, boom, it's here. So it's that thing of like, first edition, you're getting everything settled. It's the same thing with like any setting, 40K also, for example. Once you get to second edition, that's really when things are starting to get like actually ironed out, like lore facts. So it is technically a retcon, but it's like a 2-year retcon. This aspect of the Kha'vadi as a faction, it is baked into their history, and it is integral to their history. I'm also saying this, so just on no uncertain terms, this is not a like, they took the game and made it woke. This has been here from the start. But back to their history. And I will say, the actual like history for the Kha'vadi isn't anything too crazy. Like, it's not anything super expansive. A lot of the early history is following around Niobe and Starred Eagles. But of course, when you gather a lot of people together, very disparate groups and beliefs, it's similar to the Celestial Chorus. There's going to be a lot of infighting and a lot of issues, because then suddenly you have a bunch of people saying it's my way or the highway, and you have your own spiritual beliefs and ancestral beliefs that you've been practicing for millennia. In fact, not every group that was immediately slapped on the ass with a "what's up, you're a dream speaker now" was accepting of this. An example is there is a group of mages in Zimbabwe. They are known as the Ngoma. Very cool, I like them a lot. They immediately clocked this as like racist, and they're like, I'm not doing this, man, and they left. Eventually, once I finish all the traditions, I will actually get to all the minor groups, more Nefandi stuff, more Marauder stuff. I'll get to the other groups in Mage, just you wait. Though So through some great work, Niobe and her husband did do their best to try to rally everyone together. They had a common thread, they had a common enemy, they also had a common interest, because if they were actually gathered, they could resist a lot of the efforts of the other traditions fucking with them. However, not everyone was happy. There was a witch doctor from Shanghai. His name was Dambu the Outcast. And I want to mention, I love it when you get tidbits like this. So his title of the Outcast, he got it before he did the big bad thing I'm going to talk about. Can you imagine getting a moniker that everyone clocks you as a loser, like, right away? Though he would grow into this because he did not like the idea of working together. He didn't like the idea of the traditions. He didn't like any of this. So he decided to assassinate Niobe. I also saw some mention that he might have been affiliated with some Defandi stuff. I basically saw it in two ways. One talking about Dambu, the other one saying in Defandi Mage did it. I'm gonna lean more towards him because I like Dambu the Outcast being a thing, mainly because it makes me happy that he's just immediately clocked as an asshole. But he thought this would break the Dream Speakers. He thought this would shatter all their whole system. But it actually did the opposite. Turns out when you kill somebody everyone loves with a very strong goal, it martyrs them. So all this did was make the Dream Speakers rally together even harder. Still though, they were not like a main big faction. Like I said, it's extended family stuff. The Kha'vadi are very isolationist, very alone in their practice. It's very individual. So they don't really like gather around each other. The one thing they do is every year they go to Nevada and they have a big meeting. A nice way to stay in contact, communicate some ideas, just catch up with old friends, and to make sure all the information is properly being shared and given and coordinated, so if some fresh new bullshit's happening, they can unify as a projected front. Expressly, this is because of the traditions, as the rest of their history up till the modern day is rife with issues. As we all know, the Age of Discovery is an age of a lot of imperialism, a lot of colonialism. We have so many events. We have the African slave trade. We have the colonization of the Americas, both North and South. I'm not even close to being done. Like, India had its issues with the British. We also have missionaries going out and spreading the word of God. Though in history, this also kind of means stamping out religions that are very local, and this isn't even unique to the Dream Speakers, as this also impacts some other regions, largely the Norse and the Celts. But what also rankled the Dream Speakers of the time is that this shit happening to their people, to their homeland, was being profited off by other tradition mages. I'm looking at you, Order of Hermes. You know what you're doing. 'Cause yeah, imagine the outrage if you're at some like big meeting for the tradition where we gotta rally together to take out the Technocratic Union, and then you're watching the guy saying this is some European fuck who's making bank off of the slave trade, expressly for your people. Aggravating, horrible. But they, again, really believed that the strongest way that they could preserve themselves was by staying in the traditions. Some just full on left. During the Age of Discovery and then the Industrial Revolution, like half of the members of the Dream Speakers full on left. And over time, that ideal of staying together and we're stronger in numbers kind of hurts. When again, you're looking at the motherfucker who's exploiting your land. But it really would be closer to the modern day that it started to become better for the Dream Speakers, and in more modern day, they renamed themselves the Kha'vadi. And interestingly enough, with the development of like modernization and technology, with the Industrial Revolution and all that shit, they found that the spirit world was getting a little fucky. Natural spirits were dying out, but over time, they learned to accept the fact that new spirits were rising up in that wake. Because now we have spirits for technology, for electricity, for plastics, for cities. Urban spirits are a thing. They'd get along with the glasswalkers for werewolf. Until like modern day, where in our modern day, things are becoming a lot better for these very separate, isolated, and disparate beliefs and cultures and traditions. Because we have a lot more respect for it. We have a lot more interest, like historical interest in this. We have a lot of efforts to actually preserve these cultures and these ways of life. But the big one is just people are more interested in learning about it. There's less of a cultural taboo for engaging with any of it positively. It's very similar actually to the cult of ecstasy, where in the New Age movement of the United States is largely a lot of these like more occultic beliefs or these more disparate religious beliefs gained a lot more prevalence. It's similar to that. But I do want to make sure I talk about the actual role of the Kha'vadi, because like I've been saying, it's spirits, spirit world. That is a big core concept, because that pinning belief is the idea of animism. Animism is a very wide-ranging idea and something a lot of different groups have all found ways to settle into on their own. Simply put, it is the belief that everything has a spirit, everything is in some way alive. And so for the Kha'vadi, they are the ones that make sure the spirit realm, spirit world, and everything about spirits is fine and in order and balanced, like I want to make sure I hammer in. Every single tradition, every single methodology when it comes to magic in Mage isn't just like, oh, I cast a spell, I do this. They're not like wizards, because the magic that the Kha'vadi actually do is harnessed in different ways and it's manifested differently. As you can have the Kha'vadi mages that believe that they can shape this other world, spiritual energy, spiritual ephemera into like material things, or they can shape it in the other world and it reflects in our actual physical world. And others believe that it is by communing with spirits you are requesting and appeasing a spirit to do something. I think it's like this. Say you're a party of mages and one of you is a Kha'vadi, and you see, we gotta steal this guy's car to make a quick getaway. Now, one idea for the Kha'vadi could be, I am going to reach into the spirit world, tap in, look in, and I can see maybe the memory or the idea of the car keys. Or you could reach out to the spirit of the car and actually request it, like, pretty please, can you start up? My Cult of Ecstasy mage friend never learned how to hotwire. And of course, they sit on the seat of spirit, which is where I'm pulling a lot of these examples from. It is yet another tradition that says that, oh, actually our sphere is the undercurrent of every other sphere. But with spirit, you can do a lot of fun things. Like, you can actually manipulate spirits, you can hurt spirits if they're dangerous ones. Another aspect for spirit is it is a method for you to step sideways, which is in World of Darkness term for whenever you leave the physical world and you enter like the Umbra. Spirit is one of the main ways to do that, as well as you can enchant items with like spiritual energy. You can actually absorb spiritual energies. One of the cool things at like 5, it lets you absorb somebody's avatar and you can ghoul them. For those that aren't familiar, ghoul is killing someone's avatar, separating them from the idea of magic, reducing them to a sleeper again. But oh boy, don't you worry, they still have all their memories of magic and this thing that they can't feel or think about anymore. The idea that like on the tip of your tongue, there is a secret of the universe that you have been purposefully cut off from. There's a reason many mages who go into ghoul don't live much longer after that. There's no other way I can put it. To utilize their magic, a lot of times the Kha'vadi deal with anything that gets you in the mindscape to commune with spirits. Actually, again, it's very similar to the Cult of Ecstasy. That's why I've tossed them around a few times. As also ritual drug use and getting in that state of euphoria is a practice for the Kha'vadi mages. So is meditation, so is ritual dance, ritual exercise, a lot of these big practices, especially very historical practices you might have heard about. And they'll also make use of fetishes and symbols and iconography they've created. They make use of true names, they make use of very specific tailored things to whatever spirits they're trying to actually appease. The only bit that is also funny to mention, do not use like synthetic or fake things or just like a tool to do this. A lot of Kha'vadi mages think you're an absolute loser if you do this. Like, for example, if you're gonna take some good old-fashioned ritualistic drugs, and you turn around and take some lab-grown psychedelic, what are you doing, man? What are we even talking about? I also had the idea of, because you can actually be a techno shaman, because again, like I said, there's modern day spirits of technology. I like the idea, and I have this in my head, of texting a spirit, using your phone to just like ring up a spirit that you need help with. I have a feeling that it would be something they look down on. In fact, like I mentioned, there's the sub-factions of this tradition are pretty wide. There's a lot of them. If you can think of an old like shamanistic practice, you can probably find it in Mage. But one that I think is really interesting is the Ghost Wheel Society, which comes from a Native American group that realized pretty quickly that the old ways were dying out and we need to actually adapt to survive. So they are all in techno shaman. A lot of the more traditional Kha'vadi were like, that's not natural, that's a bit weird. I accept the fact that electricity spirits work, but like, I don't want to go all in on it. But yeah, that's the Kha'vadi. Not anything too complicated. I think they're a very fun tradition, quite honestly. But they are a tradition that kind of gets right to the point when it comes to what's their vibe, what's their history, and like how do they do their magic. It's nice and straightforward. But yeah, first and foremost, I want to thank all my channel members who make all these videos possible. I'm greatly appreciative. And I want to give a huge special shout out to my top tier channel members. That being Eric Sheriff, Megas Cauldron, Pork Chomp, The Funeral King, and Czar Shadow. Thank you all so much. It means a lot. But yeah, with that, like, comment, subscribe, membership, do all the YouTube things. I would expect soon-ish, maybe in the next month or so, I am going to have a compilation out for all of my Mage videos, particularly the traditions. The Technocracy will get their own special video. It's easy to do, and also it's just easy. And also it's the shit I listen to. I like anything long that I could put on my phone, minimize, and like work. So I'll be more than happy to just give that out at some point in the future. I just have one more tradition to, yeah, stay tuned. Anyways, see ya. If you had the opportunity to do magic by doing sick-ass martial arts, would you do it? Would you take that offer? This is a very reductive view of the actual subject we're covering today, but I feel like a lot of you said hell yeah. Today we're talking about the Akashic Brotherhood, very monk-like martial artist mages. One thing I believe you are going to catch throughout this video, if you are really big into mage, is the similarities with the Chakravanti. Now, I think it is intentional, because I wouldn't say either is a copy of the other. It's more that there is a common concept that then was spun off differently, but it's working off a lot of the same info and like root beliefs. Like the difference for the Chakravanti is that they had the influence of Greek funerary cults. Their beliefs are a little different. They just source similar stuff, largely because if you take it on its face, without any pure context, again, a little reductive. The Akashic Brotherhood are from China, and they take a lot of inspiration from Chinese Buddhism, while the Chakravanti take a lot of influence from Greek, but largely Indian religion and Hinduism. That's the real difference here. So, like I mentioned, the actual view that the Akashic Brotherhood are just Chinese mages is a bit of a misconception. They do not come from China, but they have a lot of similar beliefs, because that's just how that information in those religions spread. Though, if you take it on the actual Akashic Brotherhood's word, they are the oldest tradition in history. I don't, like, literally believe that this is true, but if I had to make a list of like the oldest traditions that you can trace, I'd put the Akashics pretty high. In my personal belief, I think that there wasn't one tradition that started at all. I believe there are probably a handful that started around the same time. This is just me spitballing with zero research. I've really seriously dug into this. But if I had to pick the 3 traditions you could trace that were the oldest, I would say Akashic is there. I would say the Verbena is there. And then maybe a combo of like Iteration X and what would become like the Society of Ether / Virtual Adepts, because the idea in the actual philosophies of inventing and advancing technology it goes back from the beginning of history. According to the Akashic Brotherhood, they come from Mount Meru, which is a thing in actual Buddhist like religion. Mount Meru is considered the center of the universe, and it is a place the most connected to like the heavens. You will be hearing that a lot, by the way. There are a lot of aspects of the Akashic Brotherhood that are just literally our real world like terms for stuff, or just a lot of our terms and beliefs in esotericism. There's a lot of this video that is just, if you know the history in real life, you just add a mage to it and you got the Akashic Brotherhood. But Mount Meru was the world at one point in very early history. It was just the center of everything. And on this mountain, enlightenment was taught by the celestial dragon, the tiger, and the phoenix. They taught the Do, spelled do, but it's pronounced dough, which means the way. This is the way to reach enlightenment and escape this cycle of reincarnation, your dharma, Saṃsāra, whatever you want to call it. As well, they taught that it is only through the mastery of the physical body that you can strengthen your mind. Because we are one being, you cannot just value one and neglect the other. You have to reach perfect harmony with yourself. Therefore, martial arts exists, which makes a lot of sense. There actually is a lot of just history around the idea of ritual exercise of some form. Martial arts is something that can go from like a legitimate combat sport to something that is very spiritual in nature. But eventually Mount Meru did start to shatter. It couldn't hold onto the world being the center. Our world started to come from it, and it's from this shattering that the Akashic Brotherhood, the early proto version without even the name yet, started to spread to like India, Nepal, and China, spreading their language and their beliefs, which is where we get like the start of Buddhism, of different forms of martial arts, of all of these concepts that spread throughout Asia. And this is like where the main key difference between the Chakravanti and the Akashic Brotherhood start. because while they both have the ideas of your dharma and of how important it is to keep the wheel turning, you just take it in two different directions. The Chakravanti lean a lot more into, I am a karmic assassin who will maintain harmony with the world by killing you, and the Akashic Brotherhood believes you have to maintain your personal karma. You cannot stain it, you cannot take actual, like, aggressive actions, you should live peacefully as a good example, and to make sure you are not staining your own soul. They believe that every single situation you are put in, there is an objective moral path that is the right path. Which is funny, because if you look at the history, the Akashic Brotherhood go through so many wars, like a lot of wars, which I feel like is more legitimate. What is a real philosophy if not very hypocritical? That's very human. But yeah, we see the spread of many different philosophies, many different groups. This is the origin of martial arts as a thing, which then spread out into many different types. Shaolin was actually started by a Akashic Brotherhood monk. Same with like Bushido much later, in a funny way, because there is a lore point with mages that is the Mongol invasion of Japan, which you might have known from Ghost of Tsushima, which is alt history. It didn't really go that way. The war was heavily interrupted by a huge storm hitting when the Mongols were trying to sail to Japan, and it's a little implied in Mage that a wizard might have done it. But it is that kind of thing. If you can think of something like from Asia, a different philosophy, a different belief system, some sort of honorable warrior code, all of these come from the Akashic Brotherhood, and it's why I have to kind of walk past their history a little bit. I can't detail it too much because it is so detailed. Like, holy shit, this is the densest tradition, and I believe it is better as a product if you can understand the concepts and the beliefs and who they actually are more than every single individual lore event. There is one really funny mention, of course, because like I said, this is the origin of Buddhism. It is implied that the Buddha was a wizard. He was a mage, and the enlightenment that the Buddha reached was literally ascension, like from Mage. This is unless you trust the word of one 4th generation Methuselah in Chicago. There's a 1st edition book, it's known as the Succubus Club, and there is a guy who mentions that he reached Golconda before the Buddha, thus implying that the Buddha was a vampire. I think this is really funny. I highly doubt it's not true, because 1st edition handed out Golconda like candy, and like everything else, which isn't much, it's literally like a tiny mention in a Mage book, kinda sounds like the Buddha is meant to be a mage. Now, I did mention that wars were just a very big thing for the Akashic Brotherhood's history. There's a lot. The big one I do want to point at, because I think it's the most important for their actual history, is the Himalayan War, which was a war against the Chakravanti. Before they even got the name Chakravanti, this is before they were like an organized group. Largely, the motives would be hidden for a long-ass time, but the Akashic Brotherhood didn't fully like their influence in India. Around like 900 to 300 BCE, there was a big-ass war. It lasted this long because of another concept we can bring up, reincarnation. The idea of your past life is very important to the Akashic Brotherhood, quite literally because they are able to tap into it. And as well, the Chakravanti are also able to utilize reincarnation, they just view it a little different. But it turns the war into a really weird stalemate where they kind of just stopped fighting around like 300 BCE, because picture this, you're fighting, you're killing some dudes. You kill a guy, 20 years later, a younger dude just starts rocking up, he's out to get revenge because he spent that years learning, training, and reliving his past life. He kills you, you reincarnate, 20 years later you track that guy down and kill him for revenge. Doesn't sound like a fruitful war, huh? But this is actually a source of beef that still exists in like modern day between the two groups. The way they are actually able to tap into their past lives is by something known as the Akashic Record, which is a real term. I will not say it is a real Buddhist term, because it's not. Are you ready for some esoteric history? Because this thing popped up in the 1800s with like the real beginning of a lot of different New Age and like mystical movements. Largely, it seems to source from one Helena Blavatsky, or Madame Blavatsky, a very pivotal person, and the person you can point at and blame for the idea of ancient advanced civilizations in Atlantis. Like, that shit is her. Also, this is completely true. I'm not going to say that she's a Nazi because I don't believe she was. What a start. However, the actual inner SS party did really like her ideas and spun it slightly to the idea of the ancient Aryan. There was like an actual belief in the inner workings of the SS that there was the ancient Aryan civilization and that there was a proto like Aryan race which would prove all their race science, and more and more and more actual like historically and archaeologically This was proven not true, so they simply threatened a bunch of archaeologists to, publish the shit they wanted or else. Anyways, that's just it. I don't want to legitimize the idea of the Akashic Record because it doesn't really have historical precedence. But the belief, this spans for both Mage and for our real world version of it, the Akashic Record is a mystical, like unconscious mind thing. It is a record of the start of time to the end of time. It is built from the thoughts and emotions and memories of every single person and every single thing. So through extreme meditation and like practice, you can tap into this record. For the Akashics, it is literally like you can get a play-by-play of their entire history, and like you can just find your past you and have all their memories, which is definitely why this history is so fucking dense, because they didn't forget any of it. But still, it is the goal of Ascension to escape this cycle of reincarnation. And as well, interestingly, they have a fun view of their avatar, because they believe their avatar is not a separate entity of some form. It is a part of themselves. So it is a calling, this innate calling a person has, telling them, trying to guide them to ascension and enlightenment. Instead of an outside being, it is yourself. So when you're strengthening your avatar, you're strengthening your own mind. This is also where I have no other way to put this. And I'm also not the guy to like really go into the ins and outs on whether or not this is chill or not. But the Akashic Brotherhood hits a thing White Wolf does pretty often, where there is the Asian option, and you can pick the option that's just Asia. I don't think this hits the same notes as like the Dream Speakers or Kha'vadi. I don't think it hits that, mainly because of how detailed everything actually is. It is just mirroring the real development of a lot of the different beliefs of the area. So it is way less like all these beliefs are actually the same, let's lump them together. It's more like they all share a very common root and a very common undercurrent of all their beliefs, which outside the Chakravanti, they seem to be pretty chill with the idea of these different minor belief changes. I think they just didn't like the political power of the Chakravanti, but still, I'm not the guy to tell you whether or not this is handled perfectly, largely because I can only tell you information that's surface level, shit I know and stuff you can get off Wikipedia. And personally, I feel really uncomfortable with the idea of proudly and confidently declaring something a certain way when I have no deeper knowledge other than the surface level of just the history and the beliefs. But eventually, they would open up a lot. Not to say they were fully closed off, but due to their area and the history of the time, every Akashic Brotherhood member was Asian, and whatever country that their personal belief came from, that's really what they stuck to, until we get to the 1400s with the 9 mystic traditions becoming a thing. And it's here I gotta bring this back, because you wanna know who approached the Akashic Brotherhood to offer them the seat of mind? That's right, can I get a hell yeah Shazar? He's back. From the Cult of Ecstasy, if you don't remember that video, this guy ruled. He approached the Akashic Brotherhood and said, listen, the Technocracy is becoming a thing. It's gonna make your life awful. We also know you're having some other issues. In China, there was a group known as the Wulong. There were a bunch of dragon wizards in China who were kind of dicks. They hated the traditions, and they hated the Technocracy, and they kind of wanted to rule everything. When it was all laid out, the Akashic Brotherhood agreed to join. They joined up, they purposefully avoided the Chakravanti, just like, didn't look. They became buddies with the Kha'vadi. They clashed with the Celestial Chorus and the Hermetics. Of course they did. But they fit in pretty well, and like I mentioned, they sit on the seat of mind. Mind is a very broad sphere. I think it's one of the broadest, because mind is like the power of consciousness. So it's less of like, I think real good, and more like, I can astral project, and I can get a really scary version of the ability. I can actually alter your brain and your consciousness. It is the route to go if you want to dip into the idea of being a psychic martial artist. But it's as we get into the modern day that I can say something that goes against normal mage type, and it's that the closer to modernization they got, the worse they had it, actually. Because World War II, it is easier in World War II to point out the mages that didn't side with the Axis in some ways than it is to not. Made worse because the Akashic Brotherhood spread from China and Japan, and during World War II, a lot of horrific shit happened to China from Japan. As well, the Technocracy actually was the real pushers of Chinese communism, which a big factor of that is pushing away all of the beliefs the Akashic Brotherhood hold, so they didn't have a great time in their regions. And as well, as they got to the 2000s, they eventually uncovered a dark secret. Remember the Himalayan Wars, the motives of it? Turns out, it actually was started because one of the Chakravanti, They had a vision, and this vision showed too that all these groups needed to organize. And the war did that. It made the Akashic Brotherhood much more strong and centralized. It also formed what would actually be the real faction of the Chakravanti and the Ali Batin, which was a group actually that did sit on the 9 mystic traditions. They just left at some point. I will make a video on them. I'll make a video on them at some point later. But this is a secret they hid, because if you had to tell everyone that, hey, what's up, we started a huge war a while ago we swear it was going to make our fight against the Technocracy easier, just going to cause more issues and cause more beef. Even more because there were a lot of different lies about what this was, so a lot of the members did feel like they just got fully lied to. Even worse, because they actually have the memories going back from that war. It's something they still keep hidden. The real bonus it comes with, like modern day Akashic Brotherhood, is that they are now way more peaceful, because they do genuinely hold these beliefs of nonviolence and peace and non-aggression. They hold it a lot stronger in their modern day, especially after the truth of the Himalayan Wars popped out. So first and foremost, I want to thank my channel members to make all these videos possible. Super appreciative. And a huge shout out to my top tier channel members, that being Eric Sheriff, Megas Cadron, Pork Chomp, The Funeral King, and Czar's Shadow. Thank you all so much. It means a ton. But yeah, I am sorry if you didn't like how streamlined this maybe felt. I think it's just more important to understand the beliefs. And also, it's just so fucking dense, man. I don't have the time. I can't fit that in. So I am sorry. But yeah, there will be more fun stuff on the horizon. So stay tuned, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. See ya.